Hello, I'd like to welcome everyone out to the Northeast Regional Advisory Council meeting for April 20th, 2023. I'm Brett Prevedel. I'm the current chair of this committee, and I will take a moment and let the other committee members introduce themselves. Would you start on the end, Mike, please?
Mike Smith. I represent the non-consumptive wildlife users.
Daniel Davis, represents Sportsman.
Dusty Carpenter with the BLM.
Eric Major, representing the public at large.
I'm Miles Hamburg. I'm the regional supervisor for DWR.
Brad Horricks, elected officials.
Mallory Harrison, agriculture landowners.
Rebecca Jones, non-consumptive wildlife users.
Bob Christensen, Forest Service, filling in for Natasha Haddon.
Jeff Taniguchi, representing the Sportsman.
Joe, would you take a moment?
Yes, this is Joe Arnold. I represent the public.
Is the tribe on there? Okay, I believe that's everyone that's present this evening. Just a moment, just to take a moment and tell you the procedure. We have an agenda which we will follow item by item for each subject on the agenda. And for the public, the process will be you need to turn in a little yellow slip that's out there with which agenda item you want to speak on. There will be a question and answer period to clarify issues with the DWR, and then you will also have a 3-minute opportunity to provide your comments. And it's important that everyone, we're on live on YouTube for the state, and we have a lot of passionate people about the topics here, but it's very important that we keep the presentation civil and not personal, and we'd love to hear your opinion. Thank you. With that, I'll move into the agenda, which is the approval of this agenda.
I'll make that motion.
Motion by Brad. Do we have a second? Second by Mallory. All in favor? Joe?
Aye.
Okay. Now we have a agenda item to approve last meeting's minutes or clarify any issues within them. I'd entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
Motion by Daniel.
I'll second that.
Second by Jeff. All in favor? Joe?
Aye.
Thank you. We'll now move to the item 3 on the agenda, which is a Wildlife Board meeting update. Daniel Davis represented the RAC at the meeting, and he's going to take a moment and summarize the meeting.
So the last Wildlife Board meeting was January 3rd, and the first action item that was discussed was the Utah Prairie Dog Conservation Strategy. Motion was made to approve it as presented by the division. That passed unanimous. The Utah Black Bear Management Plan, there was a motion to ask the division to remove the mandatory orientation course to apply, and just made it to where if you drew, you had to take the course. That passed unanimous. There was a motion to remove the barrel allowance, asking the division to work with the land agencies. That too was passed unanimously. And then there was a motion to ask Kyle Maynard to work with the division to strengthen the rule language, to bring new language back through the RAC board process. That passed unanimous. And then the rest of it was passed as presented. Fur bear, 2023 fur bear and bobcat season dates. There was a motion made to ask the division to look into a trap fee increase for non-residents for 2024. And that was placed on the action logs, so that passed unanimous. Then the remainder of the plan was passed as well. And number 6, the cougar update. Just be colorful, it don't matter no more. So it was passed unanimous.
Thank you. Any questions from the RAC about the Wildlife Board meeting? Okay, we will move to item number 4, which is a regional update with Miles.
All right, good evening, everyone. Been a really busy winter for us. Been a really tough winter for wildlife management here in the northern part of Utah. So, anyhow, just want to take a minute and just let our staff know that appreciate the hard work they've done. They've had some deal with some really challenging and difficult issues this winter, and so I appreciate all their hard work and trying to work through those issues. So we'll jump into it. Just talk a little bit about what's been going on in our wildlife section. Sage grouse strutting, or the lekking period, is off to a really slow start this year. Typically, lek activity be peaking about now. The only places we're seeing any grouse showing up on leks are at the lower elevations, but places like Diamond Mountain, that's still under several feet of snow, and there's just no lekking activity. There's no place for hens to nest, even if they did. So anyhow, we'll see what happens with that. But there'll likely be a lot of places we can't even get to this year in time. So it'll be pretty interesting to see how things go. Avian influenza has been present in the area. We saw quite a few geese in the Ballard area dying off late last fall into the early winter. There were some other places in the basin where we'd see geese. I think we had some different raptors, red-tailed hawks, and that also test positive for avian influenza. And then we're just getting some reports within this last week or so of more geese in that Ballard area that are sick or dying. So anyhow, avian influenza, it's here. There's not a lot we can do about it, but the public just needs to be very careful if they're going to touch or handle any sick birds out there, and definitely need to have gloves on and make sure they're double bagged and things like that. But it's best for them probably not even to handle them from a health standpoint. Just talking about deer survival in our region, and I'm sure Dax will probably touch on this a little bit later, but it's been better than we expected in this region. There's definitely been some sore spots in other parts of the state, but overall, deer survival has been better than we expected. We do have a couple of pockets here and there where we've fawn mortality has been fairly high, but overall we're doing better. It's not a completely bleak picture in this region, so we're thankful for that. Our depredation issues are starting to slow down as animals are starting to move back up towards the mountain. We've been really appreciative of some of the landowners out there we've been able to work with really well on. And it's been a tough issue for our staff this winter to work through those. We just had lots of animals down the valley floors this year, and getting into haystacks and other things. So it's been a really challenge for us, but I'm really proud of the job and the responses our regional folks have done on that. So along those lines, Kyle Kettle, I don't think he's here tonight, but he promoted to our lead landowner assistance position, filling behind Dallin Christensen. And so he's taken that position, and with that, Shay Farnsworth promoted to the predator specialist position in our region. So we'll be filling behind Shay in a depredation role here upcoming. We've transplanted quite a few turkeys in the region this year, not only from within the region with nuisance turkeys, but we've also taken in turkeys from the northern region as well. So we've got some good turkey areas in the region, and so we're happy to take them anytime we can get them. Just continuing on, had a busy fall and into winter on collaring big game here in the region. Just some highlights: we collared 47 deer on the Wasatch East. That's both bucks and does. 25 collars on both bucks and does on the anthro unit, and then 30 antlerless elk were collared on the Wasatch East unit as well. 15 bison in the Book Cliffs, and 25 fawns and 10 does on the south slope. And then also 4 mountain goats captured in the high iguanas. So it's a busy capture season, but these numbers are just a small portion of the total number of collared animals that we have in the region and statewide as well. So it's a very robust monitoring program for big game species, and a lot of the data that we use for survival rates and things in our recommendations come from this data, and it's pretty accurate and good information to have. Habitat section's doing a good job. The turkeys like it out in front of the office. This is from last year, but apparently offices are good turkey habitat. But the Dollar Ridge Fire Restoration Planning effort is wrapping up. This is a large restoration plan involving the Forest Service and as well as the Bureau of Reclamation and Mitigation Commission and the division to come up with a restoration plan for more of that Strawberry River and Dollar Ridge Fire burn scar. This will cover the NEPA needs for any projects in that, and so we expect to have probably a good decade worth of restoration work and to not only stabilize that burn scar, but to improve habitat and things as well. So that's been a good effort. We're working on a prescribed burn at Stewart Lake. It could happen as early as next week if the weather cooperates, just to manage cattails and fuels down at that wetland area. A lot of our spring projects just been delayed because of all the snow and the mud. So we'll be scrambling to try to finish some of those up before the end of our fiscal year in July, but hopefully we can get a lot of that done. And right now, our biologists and our habitat staff just spending a lot of time in planning and securing funding for projects through our Habitat Council process, as well as the Watershed Restoration Initiative. So there'll be a lot of weed control and guzzler projects coming up this summer that they're working on. And then just another update, there's a planning process going on right now involving members of the Book Cliff Working Group and others to look at summer range project planning out on the Book Cliff Summer Range. And this was going to involve both regions and also 2 different field offices of the BLM between Moab and Vernal. The other part of that is there's work to be being done to try to include some of the folks in Colorado on this to try to get a more comprehensive watershed, large landscape scale project work going on out in the Book Cliffs. Our officers have been busy out working the shed hunting closure. They've logged hundreds of hours in that effort. And overall this winter, I think there's been pretty decent compliance from the public on that. So we're appreciative of people, giving the animals a break during this hard winter and not getting out and pushing them. Officer Corey Lilga, he's finishing up his canine training in Indiana. So we'll have an officer in the region again that's trained to have canines, and we'll have a new canine as well that can aid with a lot of our work in the field. Our sergeant position does remain vacant in the region, and we'll be looking to fill that sometime down the road. Outreach section held a cool event this last weekend. It was the Loon Watch, and this year it was at Cottonwood Reservoir. And this is a picture from one of the loons just captured this weekend. Loons are migrating in large numbers right now through the region and other parts of Utah. What was cool about this event is most of the lake was covered by ice except for an area in the opening in the inlet area. And the loons are actually pretty concentrated close to the shore where people could get really good looks at them. So loons were doing a lot of different courtship behavior, a lot of calling and different things. So it was a great opportunity for those to take a look at that. Vernal's going to be hosting the state competition for the Youth Hunter Education Challenge May 5th and 6th. A lot of that will be at the UNA Conference Center, and the shooting events will take place out at the Buckskin Hills. So that will draw people from statewide to come participate in that event. So it's a good event that's going to be going on. We've elected to cancel our mountain goat viewing this year in Rock Creek just with the snow conditions. I've heard rumors of maybe rock slides and other things in that area. So it's going to be very difficult to even park any individuals with this much snow up there. So we're canceling it for this year, but they'll always be next year. The public is welcome to definitely go up and look at any time they want to, and they'll be able to see goats near Stillwater Dam. So this year we're starting a new shoot. It's called the Wild Bunch Shoot. This will be essentially a 22 shoot the day before our annual Josie shoot. The Josie shoot, of course, is a shoot that's been going on for over 34 years. It's a women's only shoot. It started with some of our old hunter education instructors in the region. And then they eventually, as they passed away, the division took that event on and continues to run that. So It's going to be pretty fun to let the guys go out and shoot the day before as well. So be a fun competition. Aquatic section, Mike Partlow, he just promoted to our Native Aquatics project leader, kind of overseeing some of our Native Aquatics work. With that, it leaves a vacancy with a Native Aquatics biologist we'll hopefully be filling soon. Unfortunately, we're expecting some significant fish kills at a lot of our smaller water bodies. We've already documented some mortality over Lake Canyon Lake. We're expecting pretty significant, if not almost total fish kills on the Diamond Mountain Lakes. Just the dissolved oxygen levels are basically down to nothing. The old Fort Ponds, we've lost some fish there as well. So as lakes continue to melt out, we'll get a better idea. But I think we'll be able to restock those waters pretty easily. Some of our larger reservoirs like Steinecker or Starvation, I think we'll be in good shape on all of those. But we'll just have to assess that as spring continues. Our spawning operations for Colorado cutthroat, they'll be upcoming, but it's all probably going to happen at once. Once conditions allow for these fish to start to spawn, they're probably all going to go at once. We're going to be really busy trying to pull those efforts off. So this, the good news about this winter is we're expecting many of our reservoirs to fill and should be some high river flows. Right now, just today, the Bureau of Reclamation is expecting Flaming Gorge to come up at 20 feet and Lake Powell 67 feet. So that'll be good to get the water back in those systems. And I think a lot of our local reservoirs should fill or come very close to it. So that's good news for fisheries. And that's it for tonight, unless anybody has any questions.
Miles, I got a quick questions on the Dollar Ridge fire. Are there any partners that are helping in that, Blue Ribbon or Habitat Council or even Trout Unlimited, some of those entities, are they involved in that restoration on the riparian zone?
They've been involved in all the planning, and this planning effort will pave the way for projects now. So as individual projects are planned and the partners will be able to come together to try to fund those. So yeah, there's been a lot of involvement up to this point, but once funding comes together, we'll be chatting with those folks as well.
Thanks, Miles. I had a question. Has the division got a direction we're going, or what can we expect as a RAC in regards to the legislation that was passed on the lions?
So right now, the House Bill 469 basically says that cougars can be hunted year-round with a valid hunting license or a combination license. And so at this point, the division is going to go with the legislation just how it's spelled out. We'll probably evaluate, within a year and see if there's things within the board's purview that can be done, and likely take a look at that and maybe bring any potential changes back through the RAC process.
Thank you. Just to follow up on that, where it involves hounds, is that something that's still under our prerogative?
Nobody has an answer. So you know.
Where you can hunt 365 days for cougars, hounds is one of the tools that are used. I believe that hounds could be out there pursuing lions. So,
Thank you. Is there any other questions from the RAC? Okay, we will move right into the heart of our topics tonight. And the first one is going to be deer permit recommendations. And Dax is going to give us a overview. And then if you remember the process, it'll be questions from the RAC, questions from the public. Then we'll talk about the electronic comments that we've received. Then we will take public comments where you need the cards. And then we will have some RAC discussion and hopefully come to a consensus. Thanks, Dax, for being here. And Go ahead.
All right. No, it's great to be back in Northeastern region. It's been kind of a long couple weeks. I'm excited to sleep in my own bed tonight and see some familiar faces. Appreciate the opportunity to be here and present the buck deer permit recommendations for this fall. This has been a pretty wild winter throughout the state. Snowpack levels, snow water equivalents, off the charts. We're kind of in new territory. And when the biologists look at deer recommendations, specifically buck permits, and really looking at general season units, we look at survival of the animals and we have to kind of anticipate where we're going to be in the coming year in order to make a recommendation that will put us inside the buck to doe ratio objectives in the management plan. That buck to doe ratio, you remember that's when the biologists go out after the seasons are over, the hunting seasons are over, and they go out during the breeding season, during the rut, and classify deer and see what we've got on the landscape there for during that breeding season. The numbers, especially recruitment of fawns into the population, can really make a difference with general season hunting, because a lot of our general season units are managed to kind of optimize opportunity. And so a lot of the bucks harvested are yearling bucks on general season units. Typically, your fork and horns, your 2 points. That's usually a pretty substantial portion of the population. And so fawn survival over winter can really make a difference as far as what's going to be on the landscape the coming fall. So, biologists we have better survival data, more data to make deer recommendations available now than we've ever had before. We've got, and Miles threw up some of those slides looking at collars, and those aren't the total number of collars we have on the landscape. Those are the number of animals that we collared this winter, that added to, animals that we'd had on the landscape in the past. And we continue to get more and better data to help us make recommendations to manage to the objectives in the plans. We've heard it's been a rough couple of weeks, some of these RAC tours. Folks are definitely passionate. They care about deer and deer hunting. They care deeply, and some folks are frustrated just because it's been a hard winter in some parts of the state to see. We've had some pretty substantial fawn loss in a lot of the northern part of the state. Southern part of the state actually looks really good, really positive. And then there's been a few pockets of the state where it's just pretty ugly. Luckily here in this Northeastern region, here in the Uinta Basin, we've seen some fawn loss on a few units, but I think it actually ended up faring better than perhaps the biologists had anticipated. So that's a good surprise, I guess, to see that things ended up doing better than we thought. Because this is such an unusual year, and we do typically see a lot of fawn mortality in this month, the month of April. What we did, if you watch the presentation, we took the data that we had 3-4 weeks ago when we had to submit numbers and get the RAC packets ready to send out. And, the biologists made their best estimations of where we would be right now. And we made a recommendation to send it out. But we have a meeting planned next week to sit down with all the biologists and look at the data now again a month later and see if on some of these units we missed the mark and things ended up being worse than we thought or perhaps better than we thought. And the idea is, and this is kind of unusual, we don't typically do this, but the idea is that once we have that data, we'll take one more look at the recommendations and probably present some revised recommendations to the board on May 4th based on what, especially, and really the focus was on those units where survival ended up being worse than what we thought it would be. So that's kind of the background, where the recommendations are coming from. With all the mortalities that we've had, our biologists have spent more time on snowshoes this year than probably their entire careers. A lot of folks say, well, back in the day, you guys did spring range rides and the biologists actually got out there on the ground, and now they just all sit on their couch at home and look at satellite color on their laptops. And that's not entirely true. It's not entirely fair. If you talk to any of our biologists, like I said, they probably put more miles on snowshoes this year than ever before, because when we do have an animal die, a collared animal die, they get out there quickly. They do a field necropsy to determine what, the cause of death on that animal. They recover that collar and bring it back. And so, yeah, a few of the biologists, when they saw the comments that all they do is sit around and do computer modeling and look at their laptops on their couch, I think a few of them felt like that wasn't a very fair comment. But they've been working hard, and yeah, I'm excited to have the opportunity to answer any other questions or dive into more detail on any of these recommendations if you'd like. And yeah, thanks so much.
Okay, I will open it up to questions from the RAC.
Where does the highway mortality figure into this?
Yeah, so that's a great question. This was a wild year for roadkill, right? When we collar animals, we try to disperse the collars around the unit and get a representative sample. And we do have collared animals that get hit on the road periodically. And I think this year I probably heard more comments from folks than ever before about how many deer were getting hit between Duchesne and Strawberry. And how many collared deer did we have get hit, Derek? None. So I think one thing, it's almost scary to wrap your mind around. As much roadkill as you see, and this is true from all the collared deer, all the studies we've done over all the units across the state over all the years, the roadkill mortality is actually a pretty small percentage of overall deer mortality. So it goes to show you just how much malnutrition on a winter like this or predation is 10 times as much mortality as what you see on the road. And Miles, correct me if I'm wrong, or I don't know if anyone here is from Habitat section, but I think our roadkill contractor, just because of snow conditions and stuff, maybe didn't pick up deer as often as, is that correct, Tom?
Yeah, that's correct. So it's, a lot of times it was just unsafe for them to pull off. I think a lot of people can see that.
Yeah, so yeah, Tom, our habitat biologist, and those guys work with the contractors that pick up roadkill. And just because of the deep snow and really small shoulders this year, we, typically I think they were picking up roadkill twice a week. And I think there were some stretches of time this winter where they were not picking up roadkill. So actually the roadkill, it is probably more this year than we've seen in other years. And it probably seemed even worse because we weren't picking it up as regularly as we had in the past.
Just a brief summary of the recommendations in the region. We're consistently recommending about a 10% decrease. Is that safe to say?
I can pull it up. Yeah, let me pull it up here.
And for the public, remember, we're talking about buck tags. I don't believe there's, with the exception of the
Yes,
I better not, I'll have these guys show you the numbers, but there's basically no doe tags with the exception of the chronic wasting hotspot where they want to reduce the density.
Brett, to answer your question, Randall Thacker, the biologist, can help answer some of that. The North Slope had a 17, is the recommendations currently. The current recommendations are to make a 17% cut on the North Slope. We haven't had as much winter loss up there as we have on the south. The South Slope Fernal Diamond has a 25% cut. The South Slope Yellowstone is a 23% cut. And the 9 Mile is a 13% cut. A lot of those deer in the 9 Mile too, majority of the deer on that unit are in the Southeast region, not really ours. And then the Wasatch Mountains East has had really good survival despite the deep snow. And so we're not recommending any cuts on that one.
One question, and you kind of spoke to it, Dax, but what's kind of the feeling in terms of the April losses? Do you feel like from the biologists that it's expected, like their guess is close?
So in this region, I don't think anything turned out worse than how we thought it was going to be. In fact, I think this region probably and the biologists, they didn't just take the number that we were at a month ago when we looked at survival and say, okay, well, this is it. They knew there was still going to be probably some mortality happening through the month of April. So they, tried to compare to previous years. We've been doing this on the South Slope for, I think, 9 years now. So, I mean, they did try to anticipate. And I think the units where maybe it ended up being worse than we thought are more in the central region. So in this region, actually, I think on most of the units, and I have the data I can tell you if you want of kind of where they anticipated it would be versus where it is currently. And, we're probably overperforming like adult doe survival on the Wasatch East. We got looking at that today. The numbers weren't adding up, and we realized because we had caught some of those does later in the year, they didn't get thrown into the sample, but when we looked at all the data, it's actually 90% adult doe survival on the Wasatch East. You'll notice we're not recommending a cut on the Wasatch East, and a few people reached out to us and were concerned about that. But the buck to doe ratio on the Wasatch East last year was 24 bucks per 100 does, and the adult doe survival is actually quite high. So fawn survival is not going to be fantastic, but it's also not catastrophic. So this region, I think probably our worst spots in this region is probably fawn survival here around Vernal Diamond is probably the hardest hit on this unit in this region, and that's why we're proposing a 25% increase on the vernal, or decrease on the vernal. Sorry.
Okay, if there's no more questions from the RAC, I would entertain questions from the public. And keep in mind, this is to clarify issues, and there will be an opportunity to state your opinion later. Tyrell, please state your, oh, there's no microphone. Mike's got it. Please state your name.
Tyrell A. Bigman. Dax, this is a question I have had for a while. I just keep forgetting to ask it on other RACs. On the population objective, is that just more of a maximum number? I mean, we started this 11 years ago and we've never even hit that.
Yeah, so our population objectives is, and I guess just to make it clear, that's the overall number of deer on the unit is the population objective. And I guess I'll be honest, I think we're optimists when we set those population objectives. A lot of times biologists will go through and look at maybe historic numbers and see where we've been and try to choose a number, where we feel like if we have good conditions and we're having, good weather patterns, we've got predation under control, if we've got good conditions, what's a realistic goal for us to strive to hit? And so, you can be a realist or you can be an optimist. I think sometimes biologists are optimists when it comes time to setting population objectives on their units. And the way we manage to a population objective isn't accomplished through how we're hunting bucks. We're not hunting bucks at a level that's going to affect population growth up or down, but how we manage those population objectives is, identifying limiting factors, which when biologists go out and recover these collars and determine cause-specific mortality, if we see they're all starving to death on a normal winter, maybe not this winter, on a normal winter, if they're all starving to death, then we need to go, beat up Bob at the Forest Service a little bit to do some more work on the summer range so they can come to winter fatter. Or, or if we see we're losing deer like crazy to lions, maybe we need to look at our predator management and there might be an issue there. So yeah, the population objectives, I get long-winded in these, sorry, I better be careful. But yeah, they're optimistic. I think it's something of a goal we're trying to work towards and achieve. And we haven't had really great conditions with the drought stuff the last, 5-6 years. So we're below those objectives on most units.
Well, kudos for you guys for realize we need a reduction this year region-wide. But the reason why I ask is it seems like every time we get close to objective, we up permits across the board, whether it's buck, does, anything. And I mean, to me, an objective is where should really be more of the minimum number. And like I say, we have gotten close, and then all of a sudden we up permits across the board. And I am one of those that believe in shutting a unit down, but not just bucks. I mean, those, everything. But that's just my opinion.
Thanks.
Thank you. Any other questions from the public? Okay, I'll have Miles summarize the online comments.
All right. I guess I'll put a little caveat before I get started as we got looking at some of these comments. I think the same person commented 4 or 5 times, so just keep that in mind. Same comment every time, but I'll go through what the percentages were. Just keep that in mind. That person was commenting specifically on the Wasatch East deer numbers. But overall, 19% of the folks strongly agreed with the recommendation. 19% somewhat agreed. 0 people were neutral, 0 people were somewhat disagreed, and then 63% strongly disagreed. And so basically the general comments as we look through those, just people were concerned about the harsh winter conditions and mortality in deer. Some people felt like we should drastically reduce permits, maybe more than what the division was recommending, or even shut down units. So that was one of the things. And then roadkill was also mentioned. And then there was one person that did strongly believe that we should not decrease the recommendation for deer tags on the Zion and Pine Valley units where the division is recommending an increase. They wanted to make sure that that increase stays intact, citing that it takes a long time to draw those permits, and they want to see that opportunity to be able to go hunt there. So, yeah, overall, people just concerned about the deer herd this winter and the winter mortality.
Thank you. Is there any cards for this item? Did anyone turn any yellow card for the deer? Okay, we'll take comments from the. Please state your name.
Travis Adams, represent the CWMU Association as a board member. So we met as an association when we started seeing basically that pocket of northern deer winter killing pretty heavily. And we got with those CWMUs in that region and started to get some commitments to internally cut back some of their buck harvest. And then we're definitely mindful of the impact and the loss to the herd. We're concerned enough to meet as an organization, and those particular CWMUs in those hard-hit areas. And in the spirit of fairness and cooperation with the DWR, we definitely agreed to their proposals in this mule deer initiative. And then we went back and confirmed that CWMUs are going to be cutting back in those areas internally on their harvest. Like to throw out a big thank you to the efforts in that area where we did a lot of winter feeding. The CWMU Association put almost 6 figures into the winter feeding program out there, and tons of labor, particularly on those CWMUs. Everybody's deer comes down there to winter. So I think we were feeding in the neighborhood of 5,000 head of mule deer. It seems, with the collaring data, it seems to like it paid off somewhat. But we'll continue to be conservative like we always are. And thank you, Mr. Chair and RAC.
Thank you for your comment. Next comment will be Tanner Carlson.
Yeah, Tanner Carlson with SFW. We would like to see the permits on the Manti unit go to 8,000 after this year, or for this year. And then on the Fillmore Oak Creek, we would like to see the increase of tags to 5 and not 11. We had quite a few sportsmen that love that unit and want to see it continue to be one of the top producing units in the state.
Tanner, while you're there, what was the request on the Manti? Was that for an increase or for a decrease?
I think it's a decrease to 8.
We recommended increasing by 400, and you guys are saying only increase by 2.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Dax.
I believe that's all the comments we have from the public.
Anybody else had a comment?
Okay. We'll now open it up to comments from the RAC or just general discussion.
I have a couple comments, Mr. Chair. With the consideration that we, on the general units, as stated, we take more of the forkies, the yearling bucks. Our 6-month fawn survival on the south slope is only 43% prior to recommendations. That's concerning to me for the simple fact that we haven't hit the green feed yet. And only only decreased 25%, kind of a rough trade-off for what's been taken. I shouldn't say taken, but lost. So I would like to see more cut back on the south slope.
Is that multiple units or just the one unit you're talking about?
So it'd be the vernal south slope and Yellowstone.
Just the vernal
And Yellowstone.
and Yellowstone, okay.
Dax, you kind of said that there might, somebody made the comment that we might come back in April and adjust these as they, as you see, or maybe a little later on, a different adjustment on numbers, Dax?
Yeah, so, no, I'm glad you guys are asking this. So that's what survival is as of, I think, Wednesday. I got the latest survival update, or maybe it was Tuesday morning this week. But when the recommendations were made, looking at how conditions were, the biologists actually anticipated that we'd have 20% fawn survival on the south slope. Right now, I actually think we're probably going to come in above that. So and this is kind of confusing because I'm telling you numbers and we're anticipating stuff and we're watching things that are changing as we move. And I get that is a little confusing, but really what we're trying to do is be proactive with our recommendations and use the data that we have to make a proactive recommendation rather than waiting to see how things turn out, have the hunt next fall, go out and classify and say, oh, wow, the buck to the ratio dropped like crazy. We better cut permits by 25%. What we're trying to do is say, okay, this is what survival's telling us, so we can anticipate where we're going to be this fall, so we know we can adjust our permit numbers now, so that instead of the buck to doe ratio on the Yellowstone dropping from 21 to 15, it's going to stay right there, and we're going to stay right there in that 18 to 20 range. So that is where survival is now, and it's crummy, but we had anticipated that it would be even worse, and so that's what I meant. In this region, I think the biologists were maybe a little pessimistic even, but they just saw the conditions and figured survival was going to be really poor when they made the recommendations. And in northern region, they did the same in northern region, but in a few of those pockets, like along that Wasatch Back, it ended up being even worse than they thought it was going to be. And those are the units where I think we'll look at the numbers one more time, where survival is actually coming in below where we thought it was going to be, and we'll make a revised recommendation. In this region, I think most of our units were pretty safe with where we had anticipated it would be and where it is. And again, the biologist's job is to make a recommendation to manage to the objectives in the plan. And, and then it's up to you guys to have your say and the public to have their say on that. And, but it's our job to try to follow the data the best we can.
Jeff Taniguchi, I have a quick question. Are the surveys done, or will there be some others as the snow melts and maybe there'll be some more losses that we're not anticipating? And I know that in viewing the video that the division still has a right to make emergency closures on whatever unit that says that there was more mortality than they thought. So am I correct there?
Yeah, so that's what I'm referring to when I say we'll come back with a revised recommendation. Usually by the end of April, we have a pretty good idea of what winter mortality was, and that's the bulk of our mortality is going to happen, during these winter and early spring months. So usually by the end of April, we have a pretty darn good idea where we're at. But we have to, for the timeline for when the RAC meetings are, we have to make the recommendations, in March. And so and in a lot of years when the winter is not as abnormal, we're more comfortable with being in that situation. This year, just because, like I said, this is one for the record books, that's why we're doing it a little different this year and saying we want to watch it through the month of April before we, and then make some revisions before the board meeting, just because there's not a lot of years when, we're still feeding deer in Rich County up by Bear Lake right now. There's still 2 feet of snow on the ground in Rich County. So this is a weird year, and that's why we're kind of putting the RACs and the board in a little bit of a different position than we have in the past, but that's why. So
Thank you.
What would a normal
I wanted to hear.
normal mortality on an average year be of fawns?
Fawn mortality on a normal year, it depends a little bit on the unit. What are we normally on the south slope?
60 to 70.
Survival or mortality? Survival would be 60 to 70? Yeah, 60 to 70% survival would be normal mortality on the south slope unit. So this year we'd anticipated that it would drop as low as 20%. A normal year would be 60 or 70. As of April 18th, so a couple days ago on the south slope, we were at 43%. So not as low as the 20, but definitely not fantastic either compared to a 60 or 70% normal. So, and I wish it was even higher than the normal. If I got to choose, I want 90%.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I just thought I'd make a comment. I understand what Daniel's saying. When I first looked at the cuts and then the permit recommendations and then saw some of the comments, I called a biologist or two and tried to get their input and see what they were seeing out there. I also listened to that part of it anyway, the Wildlife Board work session that they had, listened to part of that, and that had some really good information in there about what they were seeing units within some units and also statewide. And so Daniel, I did have some of the same concerns there as you did. At first, I think my concerns there have been pacified with the cuts that they have right now with the units that they feel like have been hit somewhat in the Northeast region and around the state. So for myself, what I've seen and what I've learned, I feel fairly comfortable with what they're recommending right now.
Thank you. Joe, would you like to comment?
Yes, I just had a question on the what Dax or Randall feel like the impact is on the herd without the shed hunters in the field, during a winter like this, and if that's something that will maybe continue in the future to not let folks in the field until a certain time, if this is an impactful time of the year. Just curious on their thoughts there.
So the shed antler gathering season that got implemented this year, the last time we had done that was in 2017, which again was a pretty severe winter where we were feeding animals in some parts of the state, feeding deer in some parts of the state. One of the things we're doing, those are some really good questions, and there are things we're looking at, and we have a lot of good caller data, and we're looking at that. And really, I think it just got to the point where the division and especially our director just felt like if there's anything we can do to minimize impacts to deer that's in our power, we should do it. And that's why, they implemented the emergency shed antler gathering closure, and they extended closures on a lot of the wildlife management areas in northern and the central regions, especially areas that are really popular for shed hunters. And I just think, I don't know if we have really hard specific numbers or data on what kind of a difference that makes, but I think the division just decided if there's anything in our power we can do to give these deer, especially in these hardest hit areas in northern Utah, more of a fighting chance to make it through this winter, we're going to do those things. We are currently putting together a committee to look at shed antler regulation. It is something that is evolving throughout the West. Idaho State Legislature gave them statutory authority to manage shed antler gathering this last legislative session. Western Wyoming has seasons. Western Colorado has seasons. Eastern Nevada has seasons and regulations on shed antler gathering. In Utah, we've done emergency closures, like I said, back in 2017 and then this year, but it is something that's evolving. We've had some conversations with members of the WAFWA, the Western Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, and the mule deer managers from those Western states. So it's something on the radar. I think we're going to put together a committee to look at it, but I don't know exactly where that's going to go at this point in time. And if there is some type of regulation, I think there'll be more public outreach and information forthcoming. So.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any other comments from the RAC? I guess in the interest of moving along on the agenda, we've had the issue with Oak Creek and the issue with the Manti units come up from the public. Daniel has brought up South Slope Yellowstone and South Slope Vernal. And I believe that's the only discussion we've had that deviates right now from what was presented by the division. So is anyone comfortable moving this in a direction?
So,
hold on just one second. Did someone have a question?
So, Mr. Chair, for the Oak Creek that they're addressing, I believe that's in the limited entry, not the general. So the Oak Creek will be a later topic.
Thank you. Appreciate you clarifying that.
All the deers.
It's all in one. Oh, I'm sorry.
It's all in one.
I spoke out.
Okay. So did the RAC have any issues with any of the limited entry recommendations? Okay. So back to where we were. Does someone want to take a stab at it?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I'd like to make the motion that we go ahead and accept the division's recommendations after his explanations of the, they're doing a lot of estimates. I truly, thought about that Mike had made a good, observation down there, but where they're taking that into consideration and looking at it, I'd like to make the motion that we go ahead and accept the division's recommendation.
And I will second that.
We have a motion by Brad to accept the division's presentation as recommendations as presented in the plan, seconded by Jeff. We'll now take a vote on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Raise your hands. Okay. Joe?
Yes.
Any opposed? Okay, that would be,
Thank you, sorry. If you're opposed, raise your hand, so we know.
no, we had one opposed. And I'm not sure how many we have. We have 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. So 10 in favor and 1 opposed. Thank you. We'll now move on to the next agenda item, which is the once in a lifetime permit recommendations. And Rusty Robinson's going to give us a summary of that. Thank you for coming, Rusty.
Thank you. Good to be here. Rusty Robinson, once in a lifetime species coordinator. Not a lot to add. I've been asked several times how the once in a lifetime species have been faring this winter. And really, a lot of our species are built for winter. Bison and moose and on mountain goats all do very well in the winter. Just because of the location of a lot of our sheep herds, they've done well also. Desert bighorns down south will benefit from this precipitation. And then, haven't seen or documented any major die-offs anywhere else in the state with our Rocky sheep either. So as far as winter survival, I think we're looking pretty good. But with that, I'm happy to jump right into it.
I had a question to start it off, and maybe Randall will join in here. In 2007, 8, and then again in the mid-teens, the mountain goats and the Uintas appeared to winter kill, correct, Randall? During the hard winters because of the depth of the snow. Are you expecting, do you have any more information since we discussed it, Randall?
Yeah, just to give you the latest up to the date, because you and I did talk a few weeks ago, we've had 6 of our collared mountain goats this year die so far this winter. We had 27 to start with, so that takes us down to about a 78% survival. And we only have collars on adults, so don't confuse fawn and kids survival stuff. This is all just adults. And so we are concerned. That is a little bit more than what we've had before, but we've only had collars on for the last 3 years, I guess. This is the 3rd year of having collars on anything and any real sample size. Last year was the first year that we'd had a lot. And we had 2 goats out of the 24 we had last year were killed. They were actually killed by predation by lions in the mouth of White Rocks Canyon. But the others, This year, we've lost 6 a total. Definitely seems to be correlated with the weather, but we can't get to all of them either. Where most of them are dead are places even you and I aren't willing to go to. And I know you're pretty brave to go hike into those cliffs, but with the snow depths, we haven't been able to get to them. But it definitely is a concern. See how we do.
I appreciate the update as well. I was only aware of like 2 of those, so that's good to know. Maybe a little worse than we thought.
And your recommendations are pretty much level. There's one extra sheep tag, but it may have been because you moved a bow hunt or something. You're basically level throughout, aren't you?
Yeah, and that would be the mountain goat on the central, UNS central unit. We moved that archery goat hunt to the beaver unit. And so basically replaced those archery tags, moved them over to the any legal weapon hunt. Other than that, yeah, not a lot of major changes.
Would you anticipate any adjustments to those permits? Like you are re-looking at the deer? Is that a discussion next week or?
I think so. Yeah, I think we can definitely take a look at that. If the UNS goats or if we continue to see mortality, I'm okay re-looking at that if you are, Randall. And when we come with our modified recommendations, we can look at that as well.
Other questions from the RAC? Questions from the public? Hearing none, we'll move to the summary of the electronic comments.
Okay, based on the once lifetime feedback, 38% of the respondents were strongly agreed, 13% somewhat agreed. The balance were about 50% strongly disagreed with the recommendation. Basically, we only received really one specific comment besides just the vote, and that was somebody was concerned about moose survival on the North Slope after this winter. So
I saw that as well. Randall, do you have you seen any mortality on North Slope moose? Yeah, not that we're aware of. I could see how somebody would be concerned about that. But the North Slope especially, they don't have a huge winter tick problem on the North Slope, but a lot of times moose do better in hard winters because it eliminates some of that winter tick. And with they got long legs and they tend to be more up high browsers in the winter and they can find food better than some other species. So they tend to do better in bad winters.
Okay, we had one public comment. Tanner Carlson.
Tanner Carlson with SFW. We support the division's recommendations as presented with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tanner. RAC, is everybody satisfied in what they've heard? And if so, we can sure take it towards a motion.
Motion to accept the division's recommendation on once in a lifetime.
Second that.
Who was the second? Okay, we have a motion by Jeff and a second by Eric to accept the division's recommendations as presented. We'll now call for a vote. All in favor? Joe?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimous. Thank you. We'll now move to item number 7, which is the elk permit recommendations. And Dax is the lucky one that gets to come back up.
I'm back for a little while. You get definitely more of me than you wanted tonight. So we passed a new statewide elk management plan last fall. I think the big changes that we're seeing with elk recommendations that are in front of you now have to do with those changes to the statewide elk management plan. We made some adjustments to the age objectives that allow us to issue additional permits. Also made a pretty big change with the splits between the different limited entry seasons. And the big change is kind of that flip between the number of permits that were issued during the early rifle season in September and the mid-season hunt that we had on some of the units, but not all the units. We now have it on almost every unit in the state. And the big flip there is the number of permits that are issued during that October rifle season. So it's going to be a little bit tougher hunt. The rut's probably winding down, about over, and there's spike hunters in the field at the same time too. So that's the big flip there. Those are probably the biggest changes. What you're seeing, there's that new late December archery hunt. So and if you want to dive into any specifics on ages or permit numbers on any of the units, we can do that. But the recommendations for limited entry elk, we managed to average age of harvested bulls. And, if we're above that, we increase permits. If we're below that, we decrease permits. If we're hitting it and the populations are stable, we recommend keeping permits about the same. A lot of increases this year based largely on those changes to the age objectives, and also seeing some growth on a few units too. I think some of the units where we've had big fires, we're seeing some flushes and some good elk production on those units too. So.
Thank you. And then before we just start discussing this, the seasons and the structures that affected all this was already approved last fall. So we could sure talk about permit numbers today, but the seasons are in place. I'll open it up to questions from the RAC. Okay. Dax, just to clarify the new general seasons of how that's going to flow.
Yeah, so that's another big change. Again, it was all done last November, but just to go through it. On our spike units, not a lot of change. Spike unit season dates, lengths, placement stays about the same. I guess really the only big change for spike hunts is the multi-season permits are now capped at 4,500. So up the 15,000 general season spike permits that are available, up to 4,500 of those could be available as a multi-season permit, where the permit costs more, but then you can hunt all the seasons. And on our any bull units, so a lot of people call them open bull units, the south slope, the big changes there, that's the big one in this region. South slope and north slope. The big changes there are we split the rifle season. Instead of having one 13-day rifle season, we have two 7-day rifle seasons that occurs in roughly the same time frame. It's like the first couple full weeks of October. And during that first rifle season, there's a quota of 15,000 permits available. And there's no longer a multi-season option on any bull hunts, but there's a quota of 15,000, and those are available for either that early rifle hunt or the muzzleloader hunt. The muzzleloader, if people choose the muzzleloader hunt, it comes out of that quota of 15,000. And then there's that second hunt, which is pretty much the second full week of October, and those permits are unlimited. And then the muzzleloader, any bull muzzleloader season is still the same time frame, end of October into the 1st of November. So. Does that?
I think that summarizes it. Other than archery now is a separate season.
So in archery always has been a general season archery elk permit. Those are unlimited. The season is a little bit longer, has been for a couple of years now. We're continuing with that again. If you buy a general season archery elk permit, you can harvest either sex on pretty much every unit in the state except the Book Cliffs. And we also made some changes to the general season youth elk permits, and the general season youth elk permit now are unlimited, and youth who purchase that permit can hunt any general season unit during any of the seasons. They just have to follow the applicable regulations. If they're hunting a spike unit, they can only harvest a spike. If they're hunting an any bull unit, they could harvest any bull, but they can hunt all the seasons, all the units, except for that September draw youth hunt, that early September draw youth hunt. So there's a lot of changes. I don't know if you remember, it was like an hour-long presentation last fall, but there's the kind of the highlights of it, I guess. I hope that helps.
Thank you. I must have brought that up for Bob. He's been smiling ever since you passed that, so.
Him and the 3 other guys that'll be out there on the muzzleloader hunt are
Yeah,
gonna love it.
them muzzleloader hunters,
Yeah.
they've had a good year. So, sorry, Bob, put you on the spot.
I got a
Where
question.
were we? We were, questions from the RAC.
Right here.
Go ahead, Daniel.
So on that first season general rifle, the permit number's at 15,000. Was that essentially established, to my understanding, to coincide with what used to be the multi-season? So there was a half and half?
So the multi-season permits have always come out of the overall quota. And last year and there wasn't a limit on multi-season permits. So up to the entire quota could potentially be sold as multi-season. As of last year, I think it was a little over 7,000 of the permits were sold as a multi-season permit. Last year also, there were 17,500 of those permits available, and a little over 7,000 of them were sold as multi-season permits. So this year, it's fewer overall permits. Instead of 17,500, it's 15,000, and there's no option for a multi-season tag.
And so on the youth portion of that, even prior to them being able to hunt every general season season, what was the number of the youth participants?
So the youth participants in the spike hunt, for the spike units, if a youth purchased a permit, it just came out of the quota of 15,000. On the any bull units, youth permits were unlimited. And I can't remember off the top of my head how many, couple thousand, 2,000, 3,000, something in that ballpark.
Close to like 4,000, I think.
Was it that many? I don't know. We can look that up. I don't know if I remember it off the top of my head. All those up committee meetings are kind of a blur to me now. So.
Yeah, I thought I recalled, and maybe it was my bad note taking, but something like 21,000 general season permits to include the unlimited youth and so forth. So
you're probably ballpark there. Yeah. So I don't remember for sure, but I think you're close.
Any other questions from the RAC? If not, we'll move to the, we didn't do questions from the public? Sorry, public, I forgot. Questions from the, let's go to Joe first. He raised his hand, and then we'll go to questions from the public.
Yes, thanks. Just the criteria between the resident to non-resident ratio. Some of them look like they're pretty close to 10 permits for residents to 1 for non-residents, but a few of them are less than that, maybe some more. What dictates when resident, non-resident get tags, the split there?
Yeah, so we shoot for 10% of the permits going to non-residents. And when we're dealing with larger numbers, it's pretty easy to work that out. When we're dealing with smaller numbers, sometimes the rounding can get a little messy looking. Typically what we do is we try to kind of follow standard rounding practices. If you're 5 or above, you'd round up to 10 and say, okay, we'll give 1 to a non-resident. So if we're going to give 5 or more permits on a unit, we give 1 to a non-resident is typically what we do. So a good example in this RAC packet, in this round of recommendations, are those late archery limited entry elk hunts that we have. It's a December archery hunt on a lot of our limited entry units. And we recommended 5 permits on almost all but 2 of those units. So it ends up being 4 and 1, 4 resident permits, 1 non-resident permit. So when you have a whole bunch of hunts that only have 5 permits and you're giving 1 to a non-resident, it does come out to be, more than 10%. But so when you're dealing with the small numbers, the rounding gets messy sometimes, but the intent is to give 10% of the permits to non-residents, 90% to residents.
You're good with that, Joe? Thank you.
Yeah,
Okay.
there's a few units that I'm don't like the ratio with LaSalle. The Dolores Triangle is 1-to-1 because of that rounding. Mount Dutton is only 6 or 7 permits to the residents, but 1 more to non-residents. So yeah, I probably don't like the rounding on, especially on the Dolores.
Thank you. Questions from the public? All right, we'll summarize electronic comments.
All right, on bull elk permit recommendations, 27% strongly agreed, 18% somewhat agreed. Just printed out, so I'm gonna take a stab at it. Printed out funny, but I think it's 3.1 somewhat disagreed and 45% strongly disagreed. And so basically, the comments that were provided is one person wanted to promote older age bulls and stop harvesting spikes. That was discussed last fall. Another commenter wanted more tags on the beaver unit for bull elk. He believes this person believes the unit could support more harvest with the current ages of bulls on the unit. And then another person has commented that division should cut back on limited entry bull to elk tags because of winter kill and roadkill.
Thank you. We'll now move to the public comments. Tyrell, would you like to start?
Tyrell, hey, big one. Sorry, guys, I wrote this down, so just bear with me so I don't lose my place. The fact that we were selling antlerless elk tags for 70% of the estimated population and then wondering why it wasn't doing well as a unit, a trophy unit, just seems absurd to me. But I mean, there we were. So we moved it over to an any bull, went unlimited on the permits, and now in the same year, we're going to go to 80% of estimated population. Seems to me like the DNR just wants to get rid of the anthro completely. If there ain't enough habitat on something like 18 million acres for even 1,000 head of elk, how's there enough for over 5,000 head of cows year round? That's just, and back when there was actually elk on that unit, they covered every inch of that, everywhere. Just depends on what time of the year. I mean, they used to winter right there behind Newfield. You don't see any of them there now. There's still the grass there, and there's a few antelope, but there ain't no elk. And I really believe that the Book Cliffs is following right behind it with the proposed increase in tags there, and for as bad as that unit's doing. Thank you.
Thank you. So Corey Rasmussen?
Yeah, Corey Rasmussen, representing Youth Hunters Voice, nonprofit organization where we're trying to view some of the decisions that are being made in the eyes of our young up and coming hunters, hopefully represent them a little bit. But we like the recommendations that have been given by the division. We support those. We would like to see more. We'd like to see an increase in the youth only tags. I think it's at 500 now. Is that the early youth? It's at 500 now. We'd like to see it go up to 750 or more, and include that so that these kids have a better opportunity to hunt. So thank you.
Thank you. Tanner Carlson?
Tanner Carlson with SFW. We support the division's recommendations. We would also like to see the youth any bull draw go from 500 to 750 permits, just get more youth out in the field. Thank you.
Thank you. We have some discussion from the RAC.
Yeah, I'd like to start some, Mr. Chair. I too agree with the youth tags I tried a few years ago to do the same thing. So hopefully we can see that through. It'd be a huge benefit. The other thing for me is that early season, or excuse me, the split rifle seasons. In concept and talking to constituents and everything through that whole process, the number of permits at 15,000 with the new option for the youth to be able to choose their season and participate in all of them, really have a hard time seeing much of a reduction. Maybe it was my foresight that earlier season would be more of a, not a high success hunt opportunity, but more of a quality experience. And so we really don't lose a lot or reduce a lot on that first rifle season in the general season. And I think I myself would like to see fewer permits there on that first season for the general rifle elk, but.
Just one quick point of clarification. So those permits, the 15,000 for that first season any bull hunt and the 15,000 for the spike hunt are set in the statewide plan. So the only permits that you can actually vote on tonight would be those youth, the early draw youth ones, because those other ones are actually set in the plan. So yeah. The 15,000 for any bull and 15,000 for spike bull are set in the plan. And I pulled up the youth data, Daniel, and
was I a little over?
The highest we've been in the data I have was 2,200, 2,221 any bull youth permits. But there also are for spike. Let me tell you, spike. Make sure I'm on the youth. For spike, it's about 1,300.
Okay. So it was probably the combined number I had.
So yeah, it's a combined number. Yeah, you're looking between 3,000 and 4,000.
Yeah. Okay. So then, point of clarification on that then. So the only time those permit numbers can change is through a plan review?
So on the spike permits, there's a trigger in the plan that says if general season spike harvest success is above 20%, we'll cut them. On the any bull, the 15,000 any bull, it would be a plan amendment to change them.
And the plan amendment can only come from you guys?
So the plan will be up. We'll have the board asked us to do several mid-plan reviews. So the first one will be after we have 2 years worth of data, and then we could look at it again and look at the numbers, and it would, if we're going to make changes there, to go through the process again. So we'll reconvene that committee after we have 2 years worth of data, and have a look and see if anything jumps out as a red flag that we need to take through the public process and make a change on.
Thank you.
Dax, I have a quick question. Would that include an extreme winter on top of the last one we had? Or are there it is the same as a drought trigger, like extended drought? Would it be like a mid-plan review to look at those numbers, or?
So if we had like a catastrophic event,
Like this year?
Well, statewide elk survival is 95%. So for elk, elk are pretty darn hardy. They don't seem to be as susceptible to winter kill. I think there's probably a pocket or two in the state, like that Morgan South Rich unit, where just everything there is dying. But the rest of the statewide elk survival is 95%. Elk are pretty tough. They maybe get in trouble, but they stay alive. But yeah, if we have like a catastrophic event, we're not going to say, well, no, our plan says we can't do anything. We're just going to sit here and watch this, crash land and blow up. We're not going to do that if we have a catastrophic event and need to make a change.
So can you speak to the overlap between like the pressure on possibly the mule deer, if that does happen again? Because the elk do have such high survival rates. Like, would that be a trigger to reevaluate that?
Yeah, so after we pass the new statewide elk plan, one of the things we do is ask all the district biologists to look at the elk units that they manage and see if their elk unit plan needs revision. They can do that anytime if there's a compelling reason, but we specifically ask them to look at it again the year after a unit plan, a statewide plan goes through. And talking with the biologist, like on that Morgan South Rich unit, she is going to do a unit plan review and look at her unit, because and she is worried about competition between elk and mule deer and carrying capacity issues. And it's a tricky unit. There's a lot of private land, and those guys are working hard and feel like they're doing the best they can do on the private. And then if we hunt them very hard on the public, everyone's mad because there's no elk left on the public. It's a tricky unit. She's got a tough job ahead of her, but And I think there's a few other elk units in the state where biologists are probably going to form a unit committee and come with a proposed revision to their unit plans, and those will come through next fall. So this fall, this November.
Okay, thank you.
Dax, I got a quick question for you. If you have the numbers there, is there a projection of how many muzzleloader tags besides Bob and his two friends? Like, is there going to be 4 or 5? He does. I met him.
I'm trying to remember the numbers. Bob, do you remember prior to, it was before the multi-season permits kicked in? Bob knows all these numbers, but he remembers them better than I do.
So before the you're asking how many muzzleloader hunters there were before. So, yeah, and actually it's been a few months, but I think it was like about 900.
Yeah, it was like 800 or 900.
And then multi-season kicked in, and then that doubled, almost tripled them, the amount of people that were hunting muzzleloader.
Yeah, so we don't know for sure. I would imagine it'll probably go back to a number similar to what it was before the multi-season permits were available and more folks were hunting more seasons. So I think Bob and his two buddies that he likes to hunt with, I'm just giving you a hard time, Bob. I'm kind of teasing you here. But I think it will be not very crowded is my guess relative to the other hunts.
And I know that's a number we probably aren't hashing out, but that's kind of the other side of the coin too. So maybe 10% of that 15 might be muzzleloader, and then there's some youth that might be mixed. I just going back to the youth comment, definitely supportive of more youth any bull tags there in September. My concern would be, do we know how they spread out? And maybe it was the fire one time, but I know one year I promised to help 2 youth, and apparently the trailhead we were going to, we didn't make opener, but there was 15 youth in one trailhead, and it's probably because that fire in the UNS. But is there a congregation in certain units? Do you feel like that's spread out? So that would be my concern of adding another 200 tags, 250 tags. They'll all be in the UNS.
Yeah, so this is interesting because this conversation has come up in the other 4 RACs, and they were all super happy to add an extra 250 youth permits. And the reality is that a lot of that pressure will probably realize itself in this region on the South Slope. I think the next couple of years might be a little bit of an exception to that with new units getting added into the Any Bull. The Paunsaugunt, the Anthro, the Oakerstand, Sperry, the Valley Mountains and Moroni Hills portions of the Nebo. I think those units will probably get hit pretty hard the first year or two. But I would guess over time, the bulk of that pressure will be in the UNS. So I think 70-ish% of our Any Bull hunters hunt in between the North Slope and South Slope typically. So if I'm way off on those numbers, correct me guys, but that's what I'm remembering.
I know this may make it tricky, but has there been any talk of spreading that and doing like either a region or a unit by unit spread to help alleviate that?
We haven't really talked about that a lot, so nope. Thanks.
Another issue is there was, when we asked the number a few years ago, the first year they did multi-season, the dedicated bow hunter tags went down by between 3,000 and 4,000. And the assumption being they bought multi-season tags. And now they will have to decide whether to go back to the archery hunt. So that may take a little pressure off the 15,000 also.
And I do think adding those additional Any Bull hunts, a part of the reason behind that in the elk plan was because there is probably a disproportionate amount of pressure in this, in the UNS in this region, because it's a big block of public land that holds elk. And so, I think maybe I'm being too pessimistic if I say the pressure's going to go back to exactly the same as it was before. I don't think it'll go exactly the same as it was before. I do think there definitely are going to be more folks that are hunting, Paunsaugunt, Oakerstand, Sperry, Box Elder, Sawtooth, Central Mountains, or that Manti, Moroni Hills, and Valley Mountains, and Anthro. So I think not all the pressure will go back to the UNS, but it's still going to probably be the largest single unit for elk hunting pressure. So.
And to talk to that a little bit more, when this came up originally on the extension of the archery hunt, that's where it was like, well, if we're going to allow that, the public that much more opportunity to encroach on the youth, then why did we not allow the youth the additional opportunity? Because, I mean, being on the mountain and still seeing it, even on the backcountry stuff, the archery hunters pack in there and they stay the whole time. Youth hunters get to go in their opening day and there's already hunters there. So I'm not as concerned with the pressure because it's already there with that overlap of the archery, because truly they only get that few 4 days on the mountain alone anyways because of that archery overlap. So, that was kind of that presumption of, give them the opportunity because it's already out there for.
And the division, when this came up in the other RACs, I think we probably did miss out on adding some additional opportunity there with adding all the extra any bull units. There probably is room to add some additional opportunity. And that's one that I just think maybe wasn't on our radar. We weren't, we were so focused on all the other changes. So I don't know that the division's opposed to that or it doesn't necessarily have, huge concerns. And just to be realistic too, it's a draw hunt. It's in September. It has great dates with regard to, the elk rut, and it's not a slam dunk either. It's not like your kid's going to have the choice of whichever big bugling 6x6 they want to shoot. It's still a hard hunt. Success rate on that hunt is higher than it is on the general season any bull hunt, which is usually in the mid-teens, mid to low teens. And that youth hunt is usually, 30%-ish. So it is higher success, but it's still, compared to our limited entry, September rifle hunts that are 90% success, it's not a slam dunk. And it's not like everyone who draws it goes out and shoots a big giant bugling 6x6. So just to be realistic.
Tyrell, what was the first unit you were referring to? Was it anthro? Okay. We're going to talk about antlerless elk later, right?
Yeah, so we've got them broken out, all buck deer hunting was the last one. This one is all bull elk hunting, general season and limited entry.
Okay.
Yeah, and then we have antlerless, which will include multiple species as one agenda item. Yep, and that's coming up still.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I do have one comment I want to make, with the recommendation to add another 250 to the youth elk hunt. On that draw, I'm in favor of that, and I don't know, I've been one that I don't like crowding, and I know what you're saying there, Eric, and I do wonder if that might have been if that was 2020, the fire up there when the trails were closed. We had Rock Creek was closed, Lake Fork was closed, Brown Duck was closed, Yellowstone was closed. So all those drainages were closed, and that probably had an influence. And I'm not going to say there isn't any crowding. I'm sure there are areas that maybe you get some youth in the same area, and that may happen. But overall, I don't know if it's really crowded. There's a lot of area to go, especially that time of year. The other thing is that for me and my boys, I got 3 boys that I put in every year, and when they were eligible, and to hunt that youth elk hunt, I'd love to be there, hunt with them on that youth elk hunt that time of year, but not one of my boys drew, and there's 6 years times 3. That's 18 years of not drawing, and I never had that opportunity to go out there with them, and so to maybe increase the tags a little bit to give that a little bit more opportunity for them. I think that would be great. If I get my daughter to do it, I'd try to go out with my daughter too. But anyway, so I'd be in favor of that.
And I'd say as well, I would be in favor. I think I've helped 4 people, and we only got one of the 4. And I would have thought too, as an archery hunter, that this is going to be a slam dunk, and it definitely wasn't. So, and especially I think the point that was brought up with some of those new areas opened up, I do think that will help in terms of that concern I brought up.
Yeah, just one other thing. I'll just echo that. That'll spread people out, but I do kind of think like what Dax was mentioning. I wonder if we'll see over a few years, we'll see a filtering of people back to the UNs. I don't know if it'll be as much as it was in the past, but yeah, I think that will probably happen.
Okay, are we at a point where we want to make a motion, anyone?
Yeah, I'll make one, Mr. Chair. I make a motion that we increase the youth draw permits for the September hunt to 750 instead of 500. And then the remainder of the plan as it's presented.
I would second that.
Who was the second? Okay, we have a motion by Daniel to accept the division's recommendation as presented with the exception of the youth limited entry elk hunt, which would be changed from 500 tags to 750. And we have a second by Eric. I'll now call for a vote by raise of hands. All in favor? Joe?
Yes.
Okay, that is unanimous. Thank you. We are now going to take a break until 8:15, and we'll be back and convene at that time. Thank you. We'll now reconvene our meeting, and we will move on to item 8, which is antelope permit recommendations for 2023. Dax?
So buck pronghorn in the state of Utah, we manage for an average age of harvested buck between 2 and 3 years old. Across the state, all of our pronghorn units are meeting or exceeding that objective. We've been kind of gradually increasing pronghorn permits for about the last 5 years based on a new pronghorn management plan and those age objectives. We continue to see really high success rates, 80, 90% success rates and really high hunter satisfaction on pronghorn hunts. This year, we're recommending increases, I think, on most of the units here in this region and across the state. We're recommending to either keep permits the same or increase them on all but 2 units. The 2 units where we're recommending decreases are the San Rafael North and the Cache Rich. On those 2 units, that San Rafael unit has seen the populations really dipped. It's a really dry unit, and I think the drought impact's probably harder on that unit than about anywhere else in the state. And so they flew that this year, and their population is down by about 25%. So we're recommending a decrease on that unit just because the whole overall numbers have gone down. And then on that Cache Rich unit, that's again probably about the hardest hit, one of the hardest hit spots in the state this winter, and we're seeing some winter kill on that unit. So those 2 units we're recommending decreases. All the other units in the state recommending keeping them the same or increasing.
Thank you. What can you attribute to the fact that the antelope have made it through this drought reasonably well, and prior droughts they've really dropped? Is it because of water developments, or do you have a feel for why they're making it okay?
So, I don't know that we've done any real specific research on that, but I do know this region, the habitat section of this region has worked super hard with partners, especially at the BLM, to maintain, upkeep, and install new guzzlers. And those do get a lot of use from pronghorn. So I definitely think that's contributed. We have also seen a lot of pronghorn use in irrigated fields. And pronghorn that eat irrigated alfalfa tend to do really well. Farmers, they grow that for a reason. And we worked hard to try to alleviate conflicts where we've had conflicts there. A couple of years ago, we trapped and transplanted just last winter, we trapped and transplanted a lot of pronghorn out of the Pleasant Valley area and some down in Ouray Valley. And you will see in the antler list, we still have a few doe pronghorn hunts in some of those units. So the pronghorn have done pretty good through this stretch of drought, which I guess that's a pleasant surprise. But yeah, probably a combination of factors.
Thank you. Questions from the RAC?
Your feelings are the winter hasn't killed a bunch off?
We don't have as many collars on pronghorn around the state as we do in other places, but as of a couple days ago, statewide pronghorn survival was 90%, which is pretty high. The only units where we saw it down was that Cache unit is at 73%, and the North Slope at 78%. So the closer you get to Wyoming, the worse it seems to be for pronghorn this winter with these kind of conditions. But the rest of the state, pronghorn survival is really pretty high.
Bonanza unit out there.
So let's see.
Ouray, Bonanza, however they.
We've got a bunch of collars. We've got 40 pronghorn collars on the Book Cliffs, and it's 93% survival. So I think that's probably pretty indicative of pronghorn in this part of the state in this region.
Dax, I have a question. Are we having any of the disease issues that Wyoming had, like in our region at all, or in at least Western Colorado that borders us?
Yeah, so that's one we're looking at. That there's a strain of mycoplasma that seems to be affecting pronghorn, like in the Pinedale area in Wyoming, and I think a couple other areas too. We sent some of our pronghorn that died on that Cache Rich unit into this for testing. And I haven't heard back, but I think that's probably good news. So that was a couple weeks ago. We sent those in for testing, and I haven't heard back. I think if they did have that Mycoplasma bovis that's been killing pronghorn in Wyoming, they would have given me a call. So, but I can follow up on that. I haven't seen the results yet. but I'm guessing that's probably because it's good.
I got a question, Dax. Sorry, I haven't read the plan like too well, but is there anything in the plan that calls out some type of a threshold that once we reach a certain number of permits on a unit, then we can explore? Because I know it calls for muzzleloader and archery to be, more opportunity hunts or things like that. Can we increase those opportunities on other units? Because, we see a lot of just rifle and muzzleloader, but not as many archery.
Dan, you got me. I guess I better reread the plan and see how specific it is on the weapon splits. I don't remember off the top of my head, but
I don't know if
I'd
it
have to
is.
look at.
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
it's,
we've added, we had an archery hunt and a muzzleloader hunt on most units, and then, an archery hunt and a rifle hunt on most units, and we've added the muzzleloader hunt to, I think, most of the units in this region now over the last few years as we've increased permit numbers just to kind of manage crowding and the number of hunters that are out at once. So I'd have to look for sure to see how tight the sideboards are in the plan there, but I don't think it's a bad idea.
okay. No, thank you.
Maybe along those lines though, like what's the harvest success rate? It's probably pretty high no matter what, right?
It's
Is that
high
maybe
on
your
all the weapon
reason?
types. Even on the archery, it's pretty darn high.
Okay.
Do we have any questions from the public regarding antelope? Permits?
These guys just showed me the plan. It's super vague. Yeah.
Yeah, that's why I
It says
asked
use
it.
archery rifle and muzzleloader hunts, so it
Yeah.
doesn't say a percentage or anything.
Well, because like some of them, we have like 90 some permits on a unit. Is there like option for creativity on season dates or different times of the year to hunt or weapon type things is kind of where I was going with that.
Yeah, I think that, that's available, and it's always this balancing act of how complex and different do we make it versus how much one size fits all do we have things. But, and on this one, the division's probably erred on the side of doing more of one size fits all.
Thank you. We have a question from the public. Please state your name.
I'm Dominic Swain, and I'm a high school student, and I'm here to give my word. So, there has been, I was looking it up a little while ago, there's been some poaching issues with the antelope, and to add with some of the winter deaths that have come with the antelope. So what are some of your thoughts about the poaching deaths? Thank you.
Yeah, I probably defer on that one. Do we have anybody from law enforcement that can speak to that one? They're smart. They stay just off camera and just away from the microphone.
She throwed him under the bus.
So, yeah, Matt, the question was just, what are we seeing with regard to pronghorn with poaching impacting pronghorn? Are we seeing a lot of that, or?
Haven't really seen much of that. In past years, we have seen a little bit, but not too much that we've noticed this year.
Did that capture your question?
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you.
So it's something we keep an eye on. Any poaching is too much poaching, but luckily we don't have it happening at a scale where it's, affecting populations. Doesn't mean it's not significant but it's not to the point where it's driving populations or anything, so.
Did we have any electronic comments on this topic?
So we just had a few respondents. 40% somewhat agreed and 60% strongly disagreed. No one left any specific comments on the pronghorn.
And we have one public. We do have one public comment.
I think that was Dominique's comment.
Okay. Did you have any further comment you wanted to make? Or are you good? You're good? Thank you. Okay, we're back to the RAC Want to discuss it any further, or are we ready for a motion?
I'd like just a question to the division. I mean, our recommendation for the elk hunt was to raise for the youth hunt. But is there any opportunities for the youth in antelope and some of the other areas?
So, you know, we have a lot of different programs and a lot of different things for youth. Within limited entry, pronghorn, there isn't anything in there specifically. In our antlerless permits, we have set aside, you know, like we give additional permits to youth. But with the limited entry buck pronghorn, we don't. And it's with you know, pronghorn are a species we don't have as many of in the state. And so I think a lot of times when we're looking for ways to give additional youth opportunity, we might do that more with some of the animal resources that are a little more abundant. So we don't currently have anything with buck pronghorn for youth.
Okay, do we have a motion on this item?
Chair, I'll make the motion. I kind of hate to agree with Dax too much. But anyway, I'll go ahead and make it twice tonight so far, but I'd go ahead and make the motion that we accept his division's proposal.
Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion by Brad and a second by Mallory to accept the antelope permit recommendations as presented. We'll now call for a vote. All in favor? Joe?
Yes.
That passes unanimous. Thank you. And well, you're not done, Dax. You got some later, but I guess we'll move on to the next item, which appears to be Chad's.
Nope.
No?
I think I've got antlerless.
Oh, I checked one.
Yeah, you're not done with me
checked
yet.
One too many. All right, we'll move on to number 9, antlerless permit recommendations. Dax.
Yeah, just, I guess, general broad overview here. You know, antlerless permits, that's the tool we use to manage populations, to deal with specific issues like disease or conflicts with private land and agriculture or human health and safety. And so the recommendations you see, you'll notice our antlerless deer permits and doe pronghorn permits recommendations this year are down from where they've been in previous years. And that's because a lot of the areas where we had conflict with deer and, you know, private ag lands and stuff like that, we saw winter kill. So we're recommending fewer permits on those units. Same story with pronghorn. It just, you know, overall pronghorn numbers are down a little bit. The drought has caught up to a lot of the pronghorn population. So not as many antlerless permits or doe permits for deer and pronghorn. Elk, like I mentioned earlier, really hardy species. Elk seem to find a way to survive, even though they do get themselves into trouble sometimes. And elk is one of the few species in Utah where we do need regular harvest on some units just to maintain the populations where they are. So yeah, we're not hunting doe deer anywhere in the state at a level where we're trying to reduce an overall population, but just kind of target specific issues or problems or hotspots. We do have several units though where we are trying to get harvest on antlerless elk just to maintain the population at the target, that population objective. So, and we can dive into any specifics or whatever you'd like.
Yes, talk about the Wasatch East, the new, the strategy on the new antlerless elk hunts.
Yeah, so and the Wasatch, that's a good example. So the Wasatch is a unit where a few years back, I guess it's been, how many years has it been? A few years back, we were substantially over the objective on the Wasatch unit for elk, meaning we had more elk than we were supposed to have in the approved plans. And in state code, the division is directed to try to make recommendations to manage to those objectives. And so we increased cow permits, we increased cow permits. John Bear, who was on the wildlife board at the time, said, "It's a frickin' bloodbath." That's what John said about the antlerless elk harvest on the Wasatch unit. And what happened, we harvested a lot of elk and we changed elk distribution on the unit too. And we'd go fly it on the winter range and we'd be over objective. But when sportsmen went out and were looking for elk, they couldn't find any because we pushed all the elk to places where they they were hidden out either on private lands or in a deep, dark hole somewhere. And, we did a lot of research. We started a collar study. That's when we implemented the private lands, antlerless elk permits, and tried some additional strategies to help us alleviate conflicts and alleviate damage, and also try to hunt elk in a way where we could keep more elk available to the public for more of the year. And that's an issue that's tricky and hard to work on with elk, because you need that harvest oftentimes on elk to keep the populations where they need them to be. But if you put too much pressure on them, what do elk on the South Slope do when the elk hunt opens in this region? They run to tribal ground where they're not accessible. So, managing hunting pressure on elk and getting the harvest you need is complex. One of the strategies we're trying this year is we're recommending adding some additional archery antlerless elk permits. So it's a permit you put in through the draw. It occurs during the general season archery elk season dates, but it's essentially an archery cow tag. And the reason we're doing that is because we feel like we can get some additional harvest without the pressure that you get from a rifle hunt, for example. If you shoot into, at an elk or a herd of elk with a rifle versus if you shoot at an elk or in a herd of elk with a bow, those elk respond differently. And so we're trying that on, we've got some of those hunts in this region recommended on the Anthro, the Yellowstone, and the Wasatch, and pretty substantial numbers on the Wasatch because we flew that unit this year and it's over objective again. And rather than just throw a ton of rifle permits to that unit and take the risk that we do the same thing again and push them all to inaccessible areas, we're going to try getting some of that harvest with archery hunters, and in hopes that we can help manage that population, but also keep a more favorable distribution of elk and availability of elk on the landscape.
Questions from the RAC?
I got one, Mr. Chair. So in regards to the Ashley Valley antlerless deer hunt, is that boundary, I've got the map in front of me, but just trying to reflect back, is that boundary the same as the extended archery buck hunt as well?
Does anybody from the region want to help us with this one?
First time doing this. Sorry, Dallin Christensen. I'm the new manager here. So the boundary follows the extended archery boundary to some degree, both on the north and on the south, but not totally, no.
Because on the north, if I'm not mistaken, it goes over to the Dry Fork Road up to 500 north.
Yes, I think it does follow it for a portion of that. And then when we go over to the Brush Creek area, I think it follows the Brush Creek Road down. And then it joins back up with the extended or with the river and just follows the river around. So it excludes the stuff that is included on the south side or the east side of the river.
I got a question. I know it was brought up about the anthro numbers. Could you help me understand, the reason that anthro permit and the population objective of the anthro? Is some of those elk coming from the Wasatch East into anthro?
Yeah, Derek Ewell, I'm the biologist for the anthro unit. So we actually flew the unit this year, and our count, we were over our objective by around 500 elk. And so that's the reason for the additional antlerless permits for that unit. And yes, some of those, with our collar studies we've done in the past, they do come from the Wasatch. But our objective is a wintering population objective, so that's the reason for it.
And the Wasatch is over objective too.
Okay, do we have any questions from the public on this topic?
My name's Rodney Smith. I'm a local resident here. What was the total number of cow elk permits upped this year? Percentage wise, and the total number paired to last year paired to this year.
So, we get the different types of cow elk hunts, for the draw hunts last year, draw hunts and private lands only hunts last year was 17,108. This year, we're recommending 19,857. And let's see, I can look up here let's see. Yeah, I guess that's really the number there. We made a couple changes on which units would be in the antlerless elk control designation. But yeah, so we're looking, just over 17,000 to almost 20,000.
Okay. Also, like I said, I'm local here, but I've been running dogs on the Manti for 10 years, and we're on the mountain. You understand that. And so my concern was the Manti unit. We're going from, what was the numbers?
The Manti last year was 475 permits. And this year we're recommending 1,040.
So that's a huge increase for the Manti, 125%.
So as a percentage of permits, yes, it's significant.
I wish the state would look at that again, because I spent a lot of time on that mountain. I just don't see it. So maybe the person that was counting it out of the helicopter had 2 contacts in that day.
I was in the helicopter for some of those this winter.
You didn't have the.
So what are you? So.
And this is off. And this is off subject now, but I need to bring it up. I think the DWR needs to do DNR. We need to get some more information about this whole thing with mountain lions as a whole. It's still protect the wildlife. So I think we need to, as a state, need to get some more information out, because I know everybody got blindsided on House Bill 469, but I wish the state would get something out there that people would understand how this is going to work. Thank you.
So on the increase, did that include these new strategies that when you talked about the increase in the total numbers?
Yes.
And they're going to have a lot lower percentage success.
So typically antlerless elk success is about 40%, but archery success, which is either sex, is, in the 10 to low teens range. So even though it may be a lot of permits, like we're recommending 1,700 of these for the Wasatch, the whole Wasatch, from I-15 to Duchesne almost, it's a big unit, but we are recommending 1,700 permits. But I don't think we'll have 40% success on that.
Right. That's my point is the increase. Yes, it's a significant increase, but it captures them lower success hunts. So there'll be more people out there. But as far as, then I know that was where, but it may not result in that many more elk harvested. Okay. So did you have a question, Daniel, or comment?
Question on that Manti situation there. How many antlerless permits increased on the CWMU as well? Was there any increase on those?
We got Chad here. I don't know. Do you know Chad?
We didn't have any increases from previous years, so the CWU numbers probably be static. And I don't know which CWUs those are, but we only had 3 change applications and we had the 8 renewals. And I think it was just the change applications that had any, well, there was a southern region one. So yeah, I don't think that there was any changes on those.
Because I can speak to that in comment period.
And I guess I'd just give a little context on the Manti. It is our largest elk population in the state. It's, we flew it this winter. We had good conditions for the flights. Last night, we talked about this one quite a bit in Southeastern region. I jumped in on a few field loads with those guys. We definitely were seeing some elk. They had good sightability. When we do our elk counts, on elk, we actually try to count every elk on the unit that we can. So it's an attempted census. We're trying to count every single elk. We know we missed some. And so that sightability is a function of, we figured 85% sightability on the Manti this year, which means, if you counted 85 elk, there's actually probably 100. And that can vary depending on snow condition, terrain, and vegetation type. but it was a good year, good flights. We definitely had a lot of snow this year, so elk were very visible and more concentrated. And that's a large elk population. It's been below objective for a little while. The objective's 12,000. And so we were giving fewer antlerless elk permits, and it's picked up some momentum, and they're producing. Those cows are having calves. And just to maintain that population where it's at right now, which is really close to the objective, that's where that permit increase comes from. The intent there is not to reduce it, but just to try to maintain. We're just trying to get in maintenance mode there. So.
Could you talk to the spread? I should have those numbers and you might have them. I should do a paper copy, but what types of permits? Is there also a big chunk of archery permits on the Manti too?
So we don't have any of those archery specific hunts on the Manti. So I think we've got them on the South Slope units, the Camas, the Anthro, and the Wasatch. So, and I think we'll see how those work. And if they work well and we can get some harvest, provide some opportunity, and not push a bunch of elk to inaccessible places, I think that's one of the strategies we outlined in the statewide plan that we would look into, seeing if we can use that in a way to more surgically, strategically harvest elk and keep a more favorable distribution. So.
Okay, Miles, did we have some public comment on this?
Chairman, I have one quick question. Dax, this is probably more of a southeast region. So what did they recommend on the Manti?
So they accepted the division recommendation as presented.
Thank you.
Okay, for antlerless recommendations, 29% strongly agreed, 29% somewhat agreed, and the balance of 43% strongly disagreed. So the comments for antlerless, one person just didn't agree with 1,200 archery cow tags on the Wasatch, and another person suggested cutting cow tags across the state, and I think that was tied back to the winter conditions partially. So.
Yeah, you're good. Yeah.
No.
I stayed collected, so we're good.
Yeah.
Stay with that. Okay, back to the RAC for comments or discussion, and we can move this forward to a motion.
So can I get one more clarification from the division real
bet.
quick? So with the consideration, the reason why I brought up the Ashley Valley unit is we restricted the extended archery boundary because of the mountain deer. But yet we're implementing an antlerless hunt that exceeds that boundary. Correlation to that, I mean, was there any consideration why we do one but not the other? Well, I guess why it's okay to potentially hunt the mountain does, the antlerless animals off the mountain, but not the bucks.
What's our hunt dates on that one? Dallin, maybe Dallin can speak to that.
I understood that differently, that the doe hunt was smaller than the.
Yes, the doe hunt boundary is smaller than the extended archery boundary, yes. Dates on that goes from August, the first day of August, the archery deer season through December 15th, which encompasses the entire extended archery season. The specific reason for the doe hunt is we have a large population of resident deer that live inside this boundary that we have a lot of depredation and nuisance concerns with. We spend a lot of time dealing with them, even money dealing with them. So the idea is just to be able to get some harvest on those. It is around the city, it is around people and the population. So archery seemed to be hopefully the lesser of the evils of weapon type. And then it gives a good opportunity for them to get it out there, long season, hopefully to get some harvest. We don't want to target mountain deer. It does run a little bit longer, and there may be a few deer that do pull into, especially the Mazer area. But I guess we're just weighing those pros and cons.
So forgive me then, I misunderstood because I thought you'd stated that the antlerless boundary was larger.
No,
than the
it's
extended.
actually smaller. I actually
Okay.
have the written description if you'd like me to read it
Well,
to you.
I've got it here as
Okay.
well, but I don't have the extended archery boundary.
Oh, okay.
To
Yeah.
compare overlay. So no,
Yeah.
I misspoke to that. I misunderstood you.
Yeah, the northern boundary is very similar, and in fact, it follows the extended archery boundary like the Rock Point Canal. But when we get over to like the Brush Creek area, it is smaller, and it stays on this side of the river. So,
Okay. Sorry about that. Yeah, for some reason I thought it was bigger. I misunderstood it earlier. So
No, that's a good question.
You're good. That's exactly why we're
That
here.
educates us all. Are we at a point where we can get a motion on this?
I got a little more discussion.
Okay, go
If you
ahead.
don't mind. So on the manti, the increases are pretty small per hunt. But my concern with that is if we're increasing that on the public ground, that was the whole objective, is to not pressure the animals to private property. And I guess if Dax spoke to that in the manner that, they were strategically added and we're not in fear of pressuring more cows or more animals to private ground in the CWMUs, then I would be okay with that. But I'd have to take their word on that.
Okay, with that, do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve as presented.
Okay, we have a motion. Do we have a second?
I'll second
Rebecca?
it. I'll second it, Brett.
Okay. We have a motion and a second to approve the antlerless permit recommendations as presented. All in favor? Joe?
Yes.
Passes unanimous. Thank you. Now we will move to Chad's first item, which is the CWMU antlerless permit recommendations. Chad Wilson.
Yeah, so I guess starting out, just mention on this one, on the tail end of this presentation, we had 2 variance requests. As we have taken this through the other RACs, it's come to our attention through those RACs and through feedback that we didn't properly point that out on the agenda, that there would be a topic on variances. So with that in mind, and trying to give the public an ability to have an honest feedback, we're going to postpone those variances until next RAC cycle. So next month, you'll get to see me again. I don't know if it'll be in person or online, but you'll get to see me again. So we'll push those back. And then just as an overview, today, most of the antlerless permits have previously been approved. So today we're just asking, the recommendation is for 19 private permits and 153 public permits.
What is the process if the unit is over objective and you want to harvest more? What's their process to get more tags on their CWMU?
So there can be a change application either direction. So they can come to us and ask for an increase or decrease, and we can do the same with them. And then it would come through this process. They also do get approved on a 3-year basis. So most of them are renewing this summer. So there is a potential at that time too to revisit those antlerless numbers and see whether they need to go up or down.
Thank you.
So as part of those variances that will come up the next cycle, does that include the land trading variance?
No, so land trades are different than, this one was non-contiguous acres for a variance for non-contiguous. The trade lands and public land, that will come in November when a lot of so there's, the year that they renew, they go to the CWMU Advisory Committee and it gets vetted through that process. And then they come with a recommendation, and we'll have that recommendation after the renewal this summer. So there's 20 of them this fall that we'll review that have public land in them. Not all of them have trade lands, but we can discuss all 20 of those this fall. I think trade lands got brought up a little bit on this because we had a bad map, I guess is the honest best way to put it. We had a bad map out there that we had on our map, it showed trade lands and it was never intended or asked for by that CWMU for it to be trade lands.
So now it's a clarification to reinstate that as part of the CWMU?
No, when we come back, it'll just be completely talking about the variance. We're pretty comfortable that CWMU didn't ever want that, the land that they're asking for to ever be in trade lands. So it was a mistake on our end on our mapping.
So just for clarification, so I can wrap my head around it then, with this particular situation you're probably aware of, so for them to retain the public ground, the option there is to trade. So was there a trade that took place for them to keep their public land within their continuous acreage?
Yeah, so there's a couple, they don't have to do trade lands to have public acres, but the way the rule reads is that there has to be a public benefit. So on this one, in the past, that's what they have done is done trade lands. And when they went back through it this February, they brought all this to the CWMU Advisory Committee and they said, these are the 2,040 acres that we'd like to trade for the 2,040 acres of public land that's in the CWMU. And so they heard that, and that's what, then we're going to go through this summer, they renew, and then it will be heard in November on that renewal of all the RACs will get to hear it, the board gets to hear it and decide if that's what they want to move forward with or not. So it was approved already on the last COR, so it's good for the 3 years, including this fall, but going forward and every renewal, everything with public land will be scrutinized and looked at.
So there's currently, as it sits, then there's no trade lands that took place on the previous COR to where now they're wanting to re-include those acreage that aren't continuous?
Yeah, so the previous one, it was the 2,040 acres, which is the same ones that they're trying to do on this one. The confusion was that with our map being incorrect, that people saw it. And so the appearance is that they're taking trade lands away, but the vast majority of those were never intended to be trade lands through the CWMU.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and I'm sure we can get into that. We'll probably talk a lot about it next month.
Chad, I have a question. A little bit confused about a comment that was made earlier. There's not an objective number set on each CWMU, is there?
No.
It's the objective number for the unit in which the CWMU. Okay.
Yes.
There was just a comment earlier that I thought, how do you set an objective number on each CWMU?
Yeah, most of them are probably too small to
right.
keep a good objective on.
Thank you.
Okay, you've heard the breakdown. I've lost track. Did we ask? Was there any questions from the public on this topic? CWMU recommendations? Okay. Was there any public comment come in online?
No specific comments, but overall 67% strongly agreed, 33% strongly disagreed.
Okay. There was no questions from the public. I'm making the assumption there's no comments. We don't have any cards from the RAC. Are we good with this? Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Chairman, I've got a comment, and it's kind of a comment / question.
Okay.
And I'm just going to get this out of the way because it's been on our minds for a long time. And this may be better for Dax. I'm not sure where this question needs to go. But so this RAC is looking at permit recommendations for all the limited entry once in a lifetime. We have some CWMU stuff in here. And every year we look at these permit recommendations for the LOAs, CWMUs, all the different units. Why does the conservation permits recommendations not come through the RAC process? There's a lot of hunters, including, and I've asked a lot of hunters this question, and some of them members of Sportsman's Group, and they don't know why either. And they wouldn't have an issue with those recommendations coming through the normal, all the other programs come through this process. Why does that one not come through this process?
And, though, that's a good question. In rural, the conservation permits, they're set up, they're different, and the timing on those and because those permits are being auctioned off, that season when they're auctioned off is pretty much wrapped up at this point. They're usually auctioned off during those banquets that occur over the winter. Conservation permits make up less than 5% of total permits. They do go before the wildlife board, but they don't go around to the regions. I don't know if I know exactly if our chief were here, he maybe could answer that better. Usually the wildlife chief is the one that takes those before the board. And I'm not sure if that's specific in rule or why it is that way, but I can look into that and get back to you, Richie. I think it's a fair question. So.
Okay, on the topic of CWMU antlerless permit recommendations, are we ready to move forward on that? I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make the motion to accept the proposal as presented.
Thank you. Motion by Rebecca. Do I have a second? Seconded by Brad. All in favor? Joe?
Yes.
Passage unanimously. Thank you. Now we have, are we going to skip this rule amendments one, or is it still a valid item then?
No, this one's valid.
Okay, we will move to item number 11, CWMU rule amendments.
Yeah, so this one was just back in 2019, we changed the definition in our rule, and it had some unintended consequences on it. So it made it so guides, employees, and volunteers couldn't put in for CWMU tags that they worked on. The intent of that, when we changed that, was that if those were bad actors and were doing illegal things, that we could work with through the CWMU program and leverage that, or potentially the CWMU could lose their COR if they had those bad actors on them. So all this does is change this back to the original intent of what we had and the way it worked before, which would allow them, so it'd allow everybody besides CWMU landowners, presidents, operators, spouses, and dependent children of the specific CWMU to put in for those permits.
So broaden the eligibility.
Yeah, and I guess to restate, this is the way that it was up till 2019. And honestly, I think most people thought it was still that way until this last year. So it's just putting it back to the practice where it was.
Okay. Is there any questions? Public? Everybody's good? Probably wasn't any comments come in on this one, was there?
No specific comments. Again, there were some, I guess, votes, you'd say. 67% strongly agreed, 33% somewhat disagreed. So I think there was probably 3 people that commented.
Okay. We have no public comment cards, so move to the RAC for discussion or a motion.
I'll make the motion to accept the proposal as written.
I have a motion by Mallory to accept it as presented.
Second.
Seconded by Jeff. All in favor? Joe?
Yes.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Thank you, Chad. we got two more remaining items, and we'll be wrapping it up. The first one is big game rule amendments from Dax.
Yeah, so this is my last item tonight on the agenda. This one is relatively short. We've got two different agenda items that both address the taking big game rule. But we kept everything that's pretty specific to the technology committee and those recommendations as a separate agenda item. The items in this rule revision that I'm proposing include requirements on meat salvage and recovery of animals. It has some stuff on for wildlife health and disease, looking at chronic wasting disease sampling, and also a prohibition on the sale of inedible byproducts harvested from game animals. And then also it has some language on there adding a mandatory harvest reporting requirement for antlerless hunts. This is something that we've been asked to do for all hunts for repeatedly. And we're taking the first step in going that direction with antlerless hunts. And if this goes well, I think we will probably bring a follow-up proposal this fall for also general season buck and bull permits for mandatory harvest reporting. So, and I'm happy to answer any questions or dive into any more detail.
Did the salvage of meat change from the previous rule, or is it just clarifying it?
It was not in rule previously. So, and what we put in there was front quarters above the knee, hind quarters above the hocks, and then back straps and tenderloins. So, and that's really similar to mandatory meat salvage requirements in a lot of other states, but we did not have that in our rule before.
How are you planning on doing the harvest reporting? Are you going to have like an online form that people fill out?
Yeah, so it'll be, right now, if you draw like a limited entry permit, there's an online portal where you can log in and enter your harvest information. It'll be really similar to that, but that's the idea. And if someone is struggling to be able to do it online, it's pretty simple. Most limited entry hunters are able to do it. If someone's struggling and needs some help, they can call our office and we can walk them through it or help them do it, but yeah.
But you already do a fairly significant portion of them tags, that like the antlerless tags. I mean, there's quite a few surveys that go out now, right?
Yeah, so we would be transitioning away from the telephone surveys. We've been getting harvest data for antlerless hunts and our through the telephone surveys where, you know, folks call people that have drawn the permits and ask them to report. And we'll be moving to this where everyone who gets a permit would be surveyed and or would be required to submit a harvest report.
So the telephone surveys would go away?
Yeah, that's the idea. These would replace the telephone surveys.
My question would be, why not take the plunge? Just take it all right now and require it.
So to do it for general season bucks and bulls, we would have had to have recommended it last November. We don't want folks to apply thinking, you know, one set of rules apply and then halfway through the application process, we change the rules on them. That's why we need a little bit of time also to work through our contractor. Our licensing department works through a contractor to do this. And so we could do it in time for antlerless, but we need a little more time to do it for bucks and bulls, and we don't. The antlerless application period hasn't opened yet. So yeah, we don't want to change the rules partway through the game for anybody either.
Sounds pretty straightforward. Any comments from the public? Then do they have electronic ones on this one?
No specific comments again. 67% strongly agreed, 17% somewhat agreed, and then 17% were neutral.
Okay, we have no formal public comments, so back to the RAC. Are we good to move on this one?
Yeah, my only comment is for the mandatory reporting, the 30 days. I don't have a problem with it. I just, there's been a couple of times when I forgot and realized I got a report. So anyway, I was just wondering if, I don't know, it's probably pretty cumbersome, but does the division send out reminders? Is that anything like that?
Yeah, so we'll send out email reminders. Yeah, but it's, you know, it's hard, but hopefully the folks can remember it's important, and we're trying to find ways to make it easy. We want this to be painless for folks, but we also want them to do it. And I guess if you don't do it, it's not painless. So.
Has there been consideration to incorporate that into the app?
Yeah, so and we are still working on and looking at moving towards like an e-tagging program, but it's some states are there. We're just not quite there yet, but it's something we're still working on and looking at.
Okay. No, I'm hugely in favor of a lot of this stuff. I mean, this is long overdue. The mandatory retrieval requirements, that's been a big issue for a long time. That's good to see this stuff come forward. So I'm liking what I'm seeing. I would like to see more, ease of use when it comes to the reporting. I mean, for example, like Bob mentioned, you get them archery hunts that last for 4 months and you're like, oh shit. Now, I forgot to fill out my harvest survey because it lasted for 4 months and, on top of all the other things. But with the commitment from DAX and them looking at the electronic tagging portion, I think it can be incorporated in that. So I'm happy.
Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, Dax, I know that's a ways away. Are you going to require tooth data as well, like they do on limited entry? Well, I would think there would be some value in that as well.
Yeah, so that's when we talked about quite a bit last night. Right now, our plans are, right now we're requesting it for antlerless. I think our plans are to request mandatory harvest reporting for general season deer and elk next fall. Currently, limited entry hunters are required to submit a harvest report. They're strongly encouraged to submit teeth on species where we use average age from harvested animals on teeth. But at this point, we weren't planning to make that mandatory as well. We want to have good data there. We feel like we're in a pretty good spot, and there's some pros and cons to making that mandatory. We talked about it a lot last night. You can rewatch that portion of the RAC if you want to. I can answer more questions if you want, but that's where we're at right now. So.
Thank you.
Okay. We ready for a motion? I'll entertain a motion.
I'd make the motion to accept the recommendations.
Have a motion? Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Have a motion by Eric, a second by Daniel to accept the big game rule amendments, item 13, as presented. All in favor? Joe?
Yes.
Passes unanimous. Thank you. That brings us, I didn't want to make it sound simple, Derek, because I put you on last. That did our last simple item. This one's highly complex, and appreciate your effort into this, Derek. I know you've spent a lot of time doing administrative stuff on this.
Yeah, it's been a lot of time, and luckily I didn't have to go to all the RACs this time around. This is the first one I'll be going to. So Gabe Patterson, the co-chair, has gone to the other RACs. So hopefully you're all able to watch the presentation, and I'll take any questions of clarification.
I guess I'd appreciate if you'd give us a brief summary.
Okay, so the brief summary is, so there's, I guess, two different sections in the recommendations. So there's the weapons definitions portion and then the other technology. In the weapons recommendations, there's the regular weapons definitions, restricted weapons definitions, and the HAMS definitions. And then in the other technology, that's just a list of all kinds of other technology that isn't exactly a weapon, but other technology that can aid in the take. So.
And so the one thing to note, what's being called restricted, which we've had some discussion about naming it restricted, maybe there's a better name, traditional or something. We do not have any traditional hunts currently. So this is defining a level of technology that'll be accepted. So next fall or whenever, you can make some of these hunts. And then the other comment that came in a lot, would you clarify the walkie-talkie and cell phone issue so we understand exactly what the proposal says in regard to them?
Yeah, so to clear, that's come up a lot in some of the other acts. So it's the use of electronic communication, and the definition of it is that it would be prohibited, it'd be illegal to use electronic communication or real-time information on a hunter or game location to aid in the stalking of a specific big game animal. And so so that would include two-way radios, phones, et cetera, any of those. But any other forms of communication on two-way radios or phones is would be perfectly legal. So if you were to communicate with family, friends, or, talk about your hunt or give directions to get to camp or to where you're at, your location, that would all be perfectly legal. It'd be just for stalking a specific big game animal.
Can stalking be done on a four-wheeler? So where I'm getting at with that is I'm hunting a specific animal. I'm going to use me. We'll use me. A specific animal, but they're known to be in between 3 draws. So I go down one, my buddy goes down the other, so on and so forth. Once that person sees that animal, are they now breaking the law by communicating that they've located that animal?
No, not until they guide you into that animal to stalk an animal. Does that make sense?
Well, to me, it's very fuzzy because my interpretation would be that's aiding in the stalk. Once I locate an animal and I tell you to come here, I mean, what's the intent, right? It's just a pretty vague prohibition, in my opinion. But
Yeah, I got a question for you, Derek. So there's been a lot of talk with this at the RACs, and I was just kind of wanted to know if you could kind of tell us how this, in the committee, how it come about as far as was it unanimous? Did you have a vote? Did you?
Yeah.
Was there opposition? Did you talk through that? How did that work?
Yeah, so in the beginning, you've been on committees, and so we make bylaws at the beginning. And so the bylaws for this committee were strive for consensus. We wanted to get unanimous votes on everything. But if we couldn't, in our laws, it said the majority would go. So when this radio discussion came up, it was it went on several meetings. It wasn't just one meeting. We talked about it several times. We'd come back. We had a couple of online meetings about it as well. And ultimately, it came down to a vote. It wasn't unanimous, but it was the majority. And so that's why the recommendation came. The committee made that recommendation to the DWR, and the DWR felt that this was a good recommendation to make.
Okay, and another question. So the reason for the prohibition on radios to pursue, what was the underlying reason for that to get to what?
So I think the ultimate goal, was to create more opportunity, and if there was any restrictions we could put on any technology that could possibly reduce the harvest of animals, then that's what we looked at. And the committee felt that by being able to use two-way communication to stalking on a specific animal, that greatly increased your odds of getting that animal. And so they felt that if we prohibited the two-way radios, that we could potentially save a few animals on the landscape.
And then if you save a few animals on the landscape, then what would happen then with opportunity? What would be the
See, ultimate,
result there?
so as we've gone through 1 million of our recommendations. So it's based on success rates, right? You know, we got to factor in success rates. And so the committee felt like if success rate would decrease, our harvest would go down, and then in the future, we could issue more permits.
Okay, and I know the answer to this. I'm going to ask it anyway, but
it's no.
So is there, as far as how many animals have been taken with radios? I mean, is there any data on that, on this percent success of people taking those animals with radios?
I guess I was correct in my previous answer. No, there is no. That would, you know, I mean, it really hasn't been a huge topic until now, and so it'd be really difficult to get at that information.
Okay, and sorry, go ahead.
I've got a question. You know, I wonder how law enforcement feels about this. Is it something that they can prove that it's going to happen or that happened? And is it can they be prosecuted for it at a reasonable rate?
Yeah, we'll let one of our, they're running. Here comes Brian.
So I was out in the hall. I need you to repeat the question, though.
The question is a two-way radio rule. Can law enforcement prove that happened?
It'll be difficult in some cases. I was just talking to somebody about it. If we have a two-way radio and we're listening in on a conversation and we can prove who was in that communication, then yeah, we could prove that. Just a cell phone conversation, that's going to be a lot harder. If we could get into their phone and see a text message back and forth, then that's going to be a lot easier. So it just kind of depends on the situation and what equipment we have at the moment. So
I think it'd be kind of a tough one to prove, but I understand the motive. I just think it'd probably be a nightmare for you guys.
It could be. You can say that.
Just to follow up with that, actually, if you find somebody with a two-way radio using that, then, so where does, as far as legalities, where does hearsay come in, and how do you enforce that legally with hearsay and what's admissible and in court? Does that, how does that work when you weren't there? You don't have any documentation other than somebody's word, either they heard or else they saw somebody on a radio before they harvested an animal?
Okay, so you're talking about if us as law enforcement isn't actually listening in on it?
Yeah.
That could be tough to prove as well. I mean, if somebody reports an incident of a two-way radio conversation, we would investigate it. We would try doing interviews, but ultimately it would come down to admission unless they have a recording of it somehow. So,
Real quick question, was law enforcement involved in this committee on the technology rules?
Yeah, so the co-chair of the committee is Gabe Patterson, and he's the one that's been going around to all the other RACs, and he's a sergeant in the southern region. So yeah, he's law enforcement. Also the law enforcement chief in Salt Lake, Wyatt Bubach, he's also been heavily involved in the committee and attended most of the meetings.
I got a question, Mr. Chair. In the committee discussions about archery, was there any talk about clarifiers? I mean, and there's a difference between magnifiers and clarifiers, right, for a peep sight. And so we're establishing more hunts and, if you will, lesser successful hunts with late archery elk hunts and things like that. But then we have some limitations due to sight, whether it's contacts, they can't make out their pins clear enough to see between the two, things of that nature. So was there any discussion about a clarifier peep?
I don't remember talking about that, but that would probably be more along the lines of if you've got a actual vision impairment, then there's other forms that you can, other avenues to pursue. with, we have exceptions for people if you get a medical note, that you could use stuff. So that would probably go down that. We didn't discuss that though.
Well, but in most cases on the medical side, that would basically give them the exemption to use a crossbow, correct? And that would be kind of the direction they would lean.
Yes.
Whereas those are still physically capable of hunting with a bow.
Well, I mean, it doesn't specifically say crossbow. I mean, so I guess they could still use a bow. And I don't know how that rule exactly reads. I mean, that wasn't part of our technology stuff, the exemptions for medical release. So I don't know if anybody else has any knowledge of that, but no, we didn't discuss that.
Okay.
I have one more on going back a step. I know that this is for the public, but is this also applied to guides and landowners and public, private land access? I could see guides maybe abusing that or
abusing
and it'd be on private land, so it'd be
the
really
radio?
hard to be caught.
Yeah, it would apply to everyone. There wouldn't be exemptions for private land or outfitters. It would be a big game rule that this is the rule.
I was curious if there was discussion about, and maybe I'm more archery slanted, and Joe did have a comment, we'll let him go. But was there discussion about just the retrieval side of I guess maybe a positive in my mind, a benefit of having that communication in aiding retrieval of an animal?
Yeah, and we discussed that and we felt like that would just be open the door to anyone would say, oh, I'm trying to retrieve an animal. And then how do you, it would be even, I mean, it's going to be difficult to enforce as is, and it'd be even more difficult if there were exceptions made.
Joe, do you have a question?
Yes. So just kind of a scenario. If we're spotting scoped and phone scoped out and you were looking at an animal. So I think I'm just trying to understand the real-time definition. So if you were looking at an animal and then you snapped a picture and sent it to maybe somebody else in your party that had a tag and you didn't have a tag and you were just helping, are you in violation as soon as you send that? Because I think the real-time definition, just trying to understand that, would you be in violation if you take a picture and send it and to say, hey, this looks like a good one, come this way?
Yeah, I don't, unless it had like the GPS location of that animal and you were telling him go to this location, that would be, if you're asking to come to you and then you don't further guide them in on the animal, I don't think that would be guiding to a specific animal or stalking a specific animal.
Correct me if I'm wrong. What about lion hounds and stuff like that? Don't they walk in onto animals to their hounds that are GPSed so they can find that? I know they can also hear them, but does this count towards that? Could that be an issue as well?
No, so this would be in the big game rule. So this would be for taking a big game. So it wouldn't apply to houndsmen.
No, because I mean, there's the telemetry beep beep collar, so you have a way of tracking whether it's GPS, whether it's it's
Derek, there was one other comment that was, I don't know if everybody got it or not, about the definition of a flintlock or cap. Did you work that language out?
Yeah, we're working on that. That was just more of a grammatical error than anything.
Okay, so
yeah, that's going to be worked
we
out.
don't need to do anything with that. Okay.
What?
It was just the way it was written on one of the weapon types. I don't remember if it was a restricted or if it was.
It's on the restricted muzzleloader.
Yeah.
It says, with a flint percussion cap, and it'd be a flintlock and or a percussion cap or a musket cap.
And it was just missing the or
it's
something
missing some
like
words.
that.
So, yeah.
So they're fixing that. Okay.
Yes.
Joe, go ahead.
Just curious how the other RACs had maybe voted on this particular. I don't have any issue with any of it except for the phone and the two-way radio. I think it's really way too broad and vague.
So there's been some long meetings, and I'm going to try to remember. The Northern RAC, I believe, passed it as presented. The Central RAC passed it as presented with one exception to remove cameras from archery equipment. The Southern region passed it as presented with the exception of the two-way communication. And the Southeast one, I want to say it passed as presented, but you remember, Dax? I can't remember for sure on the Southeast region one, but I think it was most of it was passed.
I'm sure there was a ton of discussion on the muzzleloaders. How did the working group sit with magnification scopes still on muzzleloaders? Because when that passed, it was a hot topic, went to a split vote by the board. It's still a hot topic today.
Yeah, so the technology committee is an ongoing committee. It's not going to end. And our plan is to discuss that further this summer after this process. And we wanted to get more information, maybe a survey, get more input on that, because that is going to be a hot topic. And so we want to be more prepared for that one and have more information. So the committee's going to meet over the summer, and we'll probably bring a recommendation on that in the fall.
Okay.
And the comment on the camera on the bows, that's prohibited with this new rule, correct?
No, so it would be allowed on bows to have a
Okay.
camera as long as it doesn't aid in the take of wildlife. And
Okay.
the central region removed cameras altogether.
They didn't want the cameras allowed.
They didn't
on
want the
boat.
cameras allowed at all.
Okay.
One more clarification. So on the any weapon, we have the illuminated reticle. So some of these scopes, your BDX, Bluetooth, does that basically apply to those as well? Or is it an electronic scope that emits, does the calculations on its own, and establishes the target impact?
It would be that and Bluetooth. So the only electronic allowed would be illuminated reticle, not, so if it's Bluetoothing and giving you, information, or if it is attached to the scope and gives you, as part of the scope, so those would be illegal. Only the illuminated reticle. It's hard to find a scope a lot now without an illuminated reticle. So that was the reason why.
And muzzleloader would still be non-magnification scopes allowed, except for the hams and the restricted, the regular muzzleloader.
Yeah, regular muzzleloader would be the same as it currently is, except for those things he was talking about.
Thank you.
Just to clarify there, but for the restricted part, there would be even just the one power scopes. That would be
no
out,
scopes at all.
Just peep sights.
Open sights and peep sights,
yeah.
yes.
And I don't know, I got one more question, Mr. Chairman.
Go for it, Bob.
Back on the two-way radio, I know I've asked a lot of questions about this, but I just got to ask the question about radios. Have been around a long time, 20 plus years. And so I guess that if it's, just curious what the committee felt like, what was the issue now, as opposed to why it wasn't an issue. If it wasn't an issue 20 years ago, what rose to an issue right now as the problem with radios, and
so
why they moved forward with that, I guess.
So I think why they moved forward, so as the committee began, we brought up what we did, we started out making a list of anything we felt aided in the take of wildlife. What are the things that we have that aid in the take technology-wise? And so we brought up it was a huge list. And then we weeded it down, and we, some things made it, some things didn't. And radios was one that just kept coming up, that was, even though it's been around for a long time, that it is something that does aid in the take and increases success. And so that was one they thought would be that if you made a regulation on it, you could see a result, I guess is why.
Sorry to keep this going, but it's when they say camera, say a hunter has a GoPro on, is that a violation?
If it were attached to the weapon. If you had a GoPro on your head now or on your person, that would not be illegal.
Okay, is that, I mean, is the rule, I mean, there should be a lot of technical stuff that probably ought to be defined for the public. Because there's a lot of it, to me, there's a pretty good margin of gray there. And if you're gonna prove something, it's gotta be probably well worded.
And in the rule, it's, I mean, aside from the presentation, it's worded. There's more wording in there, obviously. This is just if you watch the presentation, there's a few, I mean, it's highlights of it, you know, and just to simplify it. But if you, I mean, we send out the rule, the red line rule, and you can read through that and see each item and see how it's actually written.
I think we'll move to questions from the public, and then we'll get to your comments in a moment. Is there any clarification questions from the public? Go ahead, Tyrell.
Tyrell, hey, Bigman. Derek, I don't know if this is for you or for need law enforcement. Jeff and Bob kind of touched on this. I just want to throw two scenarios at you, two different ones, and then I got a question at the end of it. Where I deer hunt, it's a lot of rough country, and I've always got a two-way on me, and the people that I'm usually hunting with, they've either got kids with them or they're not in shape enough to walk in the kind of country I got it. But I always got the two-way with me just in case fall off a ledge, something, you know. But if I do get something down, and it ain't too far from where they can get into, I will get a hold of them to come help pack it out, okay? Somebody sees us packing it out, and the entire hunting party, a different hunting party, not established with us, everybody there individually calls in and says, hey, these guys use their radio. Or, like I say, just by myself, somebody sees me walk into a canyon they're not willing to walk into, see me come out with a really nice deer, and you got the entire party calling. So, I mean, you got 4, 5, 6 different people calling saying, hey, this guy did this, even though we really didn't. Is that going to be more of an innocent or guilty until proven innocent?
No, I wouldn't think so. This is America. So no, you would not be, you'd not be guilty until proven innocent. So no, I think that, I mean, you're going to probably have some of that. And our law enforcement probably deals with that all the time with other.
That's why I asked, because here a few years ago, I killed a really nice deer on general season on private property. And we had an entire family call in saying that I killed it on somebody else's property. I didn't have permission on. Luckily, the landowner was with me, and the reporting law enforcement officer knew that landowner, had his number, and he called him while we were loading it in my truck. Hey, is so-and-so got permission on your gun? Yeah, we're right here loading it right now. And that was the end of it. I mean, with this two-way, yeah, you're not going to have that possibility. So that's what worries me. You get 4, 5, 6 different accusations against you just because people are mad because of what you're doing that they're not willing to.
Thank you. I assume there was quite a few electronic comments.
Yeah, there were. We'll just go through the summary of the votes first. 33% strongly agreed, 17% somewhat agreed, 5.6% were neutral, 17% somewhat disagreed, and 28% strongly disagreed. So I think it's already came up tonight. The two-way radios and cell phones was a big concern for folks. They were concerned about safety, and but probably didn't realize the comments that was specifically for stalking. Others felt like that range finding sites for bows should be allowed. Felt like that allowed for more accurate shot placement and more humane and ethical shots. Another comment was to call the restricted weapons traditional weapons. Thought that was a better word for that. Another comment supported illuminated reticles on crossbows, citing that it was very hard to find any sites without illumination or magnification for crossbows. Another person wanted to completely eliminate scopes on all muzzleloaders. And another person really was advocating to keep muzzleloader scopes for the general muzzleloader hunts. So another comment was to ask the committee or the division to focus on emerging technologies rather than some of the existing technologies. Another comment was to have restrictions on spotting scopes being used to direct hunters into an animal. And the last comment received was in support of using traditional archery to expanding hunting opportunities while maintaining herds.
Thank you. And I guess when I hear that, use spotting scopes to direct hunters in if they're communicating. I mean, they've got to communicate that somehow, so they're probably illegal. Yeah, I mean, they probably are illegal because they'd have to transmit that message. Okay, we've got two public comments. Tanner?
Tanner Carlson, two things. SFW supports the division's recommendations as presented. My personal opinion is I don't think the radios is going to pass with the wildlife board, just of how it's written and how many questions like you guys have. In 2018, I had a limited entry elk tag, and the guy I was with had an Apple Watch, and the guy texted him the whole way into the bowl, and it was so cheap it wasn't even fair. So I'd like to see him just gone totally, but like you say, the rules are way too much questions there. So thank you guys.
Thank you. Corey?
Yeah, Corey Rasmussen again. We also support what's been presented with a small caveat of, we try and look at these different proposals as though we're 12-year-old kids starting to get into the game or have a desire to get in the game. And one thing we've noticed as working with these kids is a lot of them are really timid and scared because they're afraid to break rules or laws. And it makes me nervous when we overcomplicate the hunting experience, and we're having a hard time getting kids to plug into nature instead of Wi-Fi anyway. And sometimes these things just spook them away, and they'd rather go hunt zombies on the video game. So it just concerns me when we overcomplicate our sport. I'm not for, or I'm not against regulating this stuff. And the one thought I did have was maybe an orientation like we do with some of the other game animals, that people need an ethics orientation or something that people would have to navigate before they get to put in for hunts, or let's find a way to promote good hunting practices without so much enforcement. It would be my recommendation. I'd ask Mr. Chair and the RAC to maybe consider that when you're voting. Thanks.
Thank you. All right, we're back to the RAC. Anybody got some opinions they want to share?
I can start if you don't mind. So I need to tell Derek and Chad, I appreciate you addressing the question I sent you yesterday. Thank you. And I want to tell those folks that make comments via email, thank you, appreciate it. I try to read up every one of them, so I really appreciate that. Tyrell, he's to almost every single RAC, and so I really appreciate that. We do consider those things, so appreciate that. So I agree with restricting technology for hunting. Hunting needs to stay hunting. And with the technology we have now, it could take a lot of the hunting out of the hunt. So I agree with restricting a lot of the technology. However, a law is only as good as the enforcement component. If you can't enforce it, the law is no good. It's wasted paper. We have a lot of that in our government and in our system. I have a little bit of law enforcement experience, another life. So on the two-way radios and the cell phones, it's not enforceable. It's silly. I can't believe the committee actually tried to adjust that. And on the two-way radios, yeah, you could probably listen in on a conversation and legally do so. In legal terms, there's a definition called expectation of privacy. On a two-way radio, there is no expectation of privacy. So law enforcement could technically listen in, they could record that conversation or whatever, and they could use that. When we come to cell phones, that's a whole different story. There is an expectation of privacy, like your home. That's why they have to have a warrant or subpoena or warrant to go into your home, because there's an expectation of privacy. If you're doing something illegal in your front yard, they can come and arrest you because there was no expectation of privacy. They don't need a warrant for that. Okay? So on the cell phones, you're telling me that if you suspect I use my cell phone in the process of hunting and acquiring game, you're going to come and ask or take my cell phone and start scrolling through my private text messages? BS. Substantial conflict right away. For one, did anybody run this through your legal counsel? Because it's probably not even constitutional without a warrant or a subpoena. Did anybody run that through your legal counsel? Because you're not going to take my cell phone and run through, if I've had a private conversation with my wife, and look through my private conversations. Did anybody think of that? And on the two-way, you can't govern it. And I don't think it's even constitutional. Okay, there is an expectation of privacy on those cell phones. You can't stop people from carrying their cell phones while they're hunting. You can't stop them from taking a two-way radio. If I want my kid to have a two-way radio where I don't have cell phone service, I use two-way radios a lot when we're gathering cattle because we get scattered all over the place. And my kids go off by themselves. I want to know where they are. Okay? So you can't stop people from taking two, and it's nearly impossible. You got to take this out of the rule. It should have never been in there in the first place. It's wasted paper. Thank you.
I guess, my take on it is there's not many people around anymore that are like me that are happy when you're out of coverage. It's like a relief. Now it's more the opposite, and everybody's real, comfortable with their phone, and we're not gonna regulate cell phones. I mean, just realistically, because you're talking about everybody on the mountain is carrying one.
Right, Chairman, but when you put this in a rule where you try to restrict those cell phones.
Well, I'm sort of agreeing with you. Why create the headache? Because you're not.
Don't even put it in there.
I'm agreeing with you. It's not realistic on the cell phones. Two-way radios are kind of probably a thing of the past anyway. I mean, you and I may carry one, but it's usually to say I got something. It's not. Nobody wants to, unless you have earphones, nobody wants the noise coming out of it while they're sneaking around. And so I don't think the radios are a big issue, but the cell phones they're evolving also, the technology, and we don't even know what's coming next with the iWatch example and stuff like that. So my take on it is we ought to move forward, but we can sure make a recommendation to leave the phones out of it if we want, right?
I was just gonna say, I just got a message from our director's office, and they said they wouldn't be able to check people's cell phones without a warrant.
So a few comments, if I may, as well. To agree with the two-way communications, as I pointed out before, archery hunter gets guided in 40 yards because his weapon restriction, choice of weapon, versus going down a canyon 400 yards away because the rifle can reach farther. To me, it's too vague, easy to cross that off. When we talk about reducing success or reducing the effect, I don't know how else to say it, but the effectiveness as a shooter, a hunter, a harvester, however you want to take it, just going to call it out. We can go back and look at all the data and you can put in for a muzzleloader hunt somewhere. The success rates are so high, the opportunities are so high, your opportunities to draw are so much harder now for a muzzleloader in the state that they're in now, being able to use the magnified scopes. So if we want to look at a true restriction, when you look at success rates and sustainability, that to me has been one of the biggest key components that's had the biggest impact on harvest success. I just don't know if I want to wait to see it go through next fall. Maybe the Wildlife Board wouldn't address it. Maybe the rest of you guys don't feel the need to as well. But I mean, that's the obvious one to me.
Chairman, I want to address the warrant thing just a little bit. So if they seen someone's talking on a cell phone and then they shot an animal, it would be a probable cause warrant. Is that probable cause to get a warrant? And then they get to scroll through your private messages anyway because they seen you talking on a cell phone? I mean, it's such a wide open deal that it's got to be stricken. I mean, the state has enough trouble. They don't need to invite it.
Make a comment as well on it. So that, I really don't have a problem with the other parts of the technology proposal that when it comes to scopes on muzzleloaders later on, I don't know, I may disagree with Daniel on that. It kind of depends on what the proposal comes up, but that's at a different time, a different RAC. And but I'll just bring up one thing. I have wondered about the way the wording is for the use of a drone. I know that's come up at a few other RACs. I have wondered about that. Someone who's not attempting to locate game, but they're using the drone would be guilty under that. No, somebody that's not even hunting, it appears to me the way it's worded. But you can probably tell as the questions I asked before, the main concern I have is with the two-way radio, and for me there's three things there. Number one, I guess everybody's experience of hunting is different, and some of them are the same, some of them are different. But for my family, my group, it's been a blast. Pun intended there, a blast. Using radios to hunt with. And actually, when this come up, I was going through all the animals I've taken, my kids have taken, and I honestly cannot say I've taken one animal where a radio has helped me out. Having said that, then you can say, well, see, it doesn't matter then if you take radios away. But it does, because there is a social aspect to it. It's exhilarating when you're on the radio talking back and forth to one another. Going after an animal, it doesn't work, and the animal slips away. You make a mistake, and you kind of screw up, and you're back and forth on the radio. And my sons and I have had a blast doing that. And the stories around deer camp, got a story about myself getting excited, buck fever, shooting my ramrod. And that is a funny story that we tell at deer camp all the time. And it was funny because everybody was involved with it on the radio, talking back and forth, and what was happening. So that's one point. There's a social aspect to it. The other thing is that, as it's been explained, that the enforcing, I just don't see how that can be enforced. There's a lot of scenarios in the other RACs that have been brought up, and one of the RACs, I think they had one of the lawyers on, and took them a little bit to try to figure out if it was legal or not. I think that kind of showed me that there's a lot of interpretation here. And in fact, with the way it was presented in some of the other RACs with the scenarios, the way it was presented, I think Gabe had mentioned that if you see a group of elk in a canyon and you radio to somebody and, hey, there's elk here, that's, come over, that's legal. And then he also gave the definition of stalking, and which the definition is you're on foot. And so like one of the things that Daniel was saying, the way it reads to me, you'd still be legal on an ATV. And it also reads to me the way, I almost kind of disagree with the way it was presented, because it says, prohibit the use of electronic communication to receive real-time information on hunter, game, or game location, which if you're in a canyon, a guy is on another ridge, and you locate the game, and then you tell him, hey, there's elk over here. Then, that's, to me, that's real-time information. And so if he come over, especially if he was on foot, the way the stalking definition is, then he would be in violation coming over, even though that you really haven't started going after the animal yet. But it just seems like with all the RACs, just all the scenarios, and I can bring up a lot of different scenarios, and when you start doing that, it just seems like it's so vague that they're left open to so much interpretation that it gets muddy and murky and almost kind of in a quagmire. I'll just bring up one other thing. If the way I am, I'd be looking over my shoulder every time if I used a radio, and if we happened to harvest an animal and I was on my radio for something legal, and I'd be looking over my shoulder, man, I hope nobody saw me, because I wouldn't want them to think that I did something illegal, even though I didn't, and then get turned in. And then when something like that happens, I know it was mentioned that someone had an experience like that. What happens with a good hunt, if you harvest a good animal, and it happens, you harvest a good animal, and then somebody else is after the animal, gets a little upset, and they say something, and you get questioned, then your hunt turns sour. Your nice hunt that you had good memory of harvesting an animal, all of a sudden turns sour because now you're being questioned. And I think there's some problems there with an enforcement and how it affects somebody's hunt. And the other thing I wanted to mention was the third thing, last one, was that trying to get an opportunity by implementing this, trying to get an opportunity to increase permits. Well, I don't think anybody can really say, well, how much opportunity is that going to actually result in? I don't think anybody can say that. You won't know until the end result. My opinion is, I don't think you're going to see really that much of a change in harvest. I really don't. There'll probably be some, I know radios help in some circumstances. Obviously, I'm not denying that. There's some circumstances where they haven't, but the actual harvest, to be substantial in the harvest, I don't know. I just don't think you're going to see a substantial effect in the harvest success. And so you'd be hurting somebody's social aspect and kind of almost a quagmire in the enforcement on trying to enforce it. And then I don't think, in my opinion, I don't think you'd get the end result that we were actually after.
Brian, can you maybe clarify the enforcement?
The enforcement as far as well, Richie's exactly right. I mean, there is no expectation. Oh, sorry. Don't speak loud enough, apparently. Yeah, there is no expectation of privacy using the radios. As law enforcement, to be honest with you, we use them. We have used them, and when it comes to cell phones, that's a whole other issue. It would come up if you were suspected of it, and we would ask you, and if you wanted to hand it over, then we could look through it. But very few people obviously do that, so it would be a warrant situation in that case. So it could be, it's very difficult. So enforcement wise.
Thank you. In the interest of moving this along, one thing I've learned very clearly in the last 7 years is we're not making this decision. And Randy and the Wildlife Board, and Randy Dirth is here from Wildlife Board, and I'd like to welcome you. Thanks for coming, Randy. Sorry I missed you earlier. You're You grew a beard and I didn't recognize you, I guess. You're trying to sneak in. So all we can do is test some motions, see if we can get a consensus, and tell them our concerns. I've heard some very good concerns here. If anybody wants to incorporate them into a motion and see how it goes on the RAC, I think that's our route to go. We're not necessarily going to get unanimous, but I think we've heard all the issues, and they're very valid. So I would like to hear somebody's motion and see how much support you can get.
I'd like to make a motion to accept the division's recommendations as presented, with the exception of the two-way radio and the cell phone communication portion, which should be stricken.
I'll second it. We have a motion and a second. Richie made the motion, Brad seconded it to accept the division's recommendation, technology committee recommendations for the big game rule amendments as presented, with the exception of two-way radio and cell phone communication, which would be removed from the restrictions. Is that accurate?
Could I add a caveat to that and just say that we need it worded correctly and defined correctly if we're going to really do this right. And so I'd like to add that to the motion.
What were you referring to? The cell phone and two-way radio issue, or the?
Well, yeah, I'm okay with the motion, but I'd like to just add that caveat that we need to define this and make sure it's well-written and defined for the public if we're going to do this.
On all the other
Is that
aspects?
okay, Daniel?
On the other aspects, or are you just talking about the cell phone and the two-way
Yeah, I'm
radio?
okay with that. I mean, I just want to.
Sure. So, yeah, I'm a little bit confused. If it's stricken, there will be no language to define it. That was the motion. Do you want to amend the motion to leave the cell phone and two-way in there with other language? Because if it's stricken, there will be no definition.
Okay, I got you. So we can vote on that.
Let's see where the motion is with the initial motion.
Well,
Joe, did you have a question?
No, I was just getting ready to vote with not with Jeff's comment, with Richie and Brad's second.
Okay. So we have a motion on the table, which I stated a moment ago. Let's take a vote and see how that goes. All in favor?
so I got some clarification, because if this passes, then everything passes, not just the radio communication
That's
itself,
correct.
correct?
That's correct.
So can we have a little bit more discussion on a few of the others? I don't want to talk about radios. We kicked that horse good enough.
Right, just on point of order, you can amend the motion.
So you want to strike some other items out of there? Is that what you'd like to do?
Yes.
But scopes aren't on this action item though, Daniel. So I don't know if we can add scopes at this point.
You can amend the motion.
So then a point of clarification, we can only take away what's on this. We can't add to it or change it. I mean, I thought that's what this was all about, was definition.
Yeah, you can amend the motion by either taking or adding.
Right. That's what I thought. Okay. So I'd like to amend the motion to include clarifiers for the archery, tackle, and make it a single magnification on muzzleloaders. If there's anybody that would entertain a second on that.
Add clarifiers. Is that
Clarifier
removing?
peeps.
Is that putting a restriction on them or taking them off?
No, it's allowing them.
Allowing, okay. And repeat that magnification.
A single power magnification on the muzzleloaders.
All muzzleloaders through all the restricted and the,
No, just for the regular weapon definition.
isn't that our current?
No.
You can have magnification currently. Okay, so you're going to reduce
So
it to single, one times magnification?
Yes, because
On-
it still allows for illuminated reticles, single power red dots, all that stuff would still be the same. It just reduces it down to single power magnification.
Okay. So let me clarify where we're at, Richie. So right now, we've got a motion on the table to remove cell phones and two-way radios. And then we have an amended motion to include clarifiers on the archery, allowing them, and to restrict magnification on all muzzle loaders where scopes are allowed, on hunts where scopes are allowed, to one time. Is that
That would
correct?
be correct on my motion, yes. My amendment.
So with that, do we, does,
Vote on the amendment.
do we
Well,
have, do we have a, do we
just
have
on
a
the
second?
amendment.
Do we have a second on the amended motion? We have a second from Mallory.
Vote on the all one, right? Oh, you vote on the amendment, and if the amendment doesn't pass, or it does pass, then you vote against.
Right. Right.
Okay, so we're going to call for a vote on the amendment, which is the clarifiers and the magnification of scopes. Adding the clarifiers and reducing the magnification of scopes. All in favor? Is that all? Joe?
No.
We have 3 in favor. I believe there's 10 left because Mike left, so there's 7 opposed. So the amended motion fails, which puts us back to the original motion. And I'm not hearing any more amendments, right?
I would make an amendment to add the clarifiers. I have a archery friend that needs it. The 1 power clarifier, is that right? Is there a power to them?
Not a power, because then you're talking a magnifier.
Okay.
So a
It's just a
clarifier is
clarifier.
just to correct, to compensate for their eyesight.
Right. To add that to the first motion.
Did you make that motion?
I'd make that motion.
I'll
Repeat it,
second it.
please. Same as the previous one, but just took out the scope issue? Okay. We now have an amended motion to just add clarifiers to archery. Do we have a second? Daniel second it? Okay. Now we'll vote on that second amendment. All in favor? Joe?
Yes, just clarifiers only.
Yes.
Correct? Correct.
Pardon me. Let's redo that. All in favor? Those, I need to call opposed so we can count these here. That motion was 5-5.
You get to pay, you get to break the tie.
Show my lack of knowledge here. Explain this.
It's your mic.
So the clarifier works in the manner that it goes in the peep sight. So it's mounted on the string that's closest to your eye. So when you're acquiring your target, you have the pins that are closer to you. And so it makes that distant object either more clear, rather, because depending on your eyesight situation, your pins are either clear, but the target's blurry, or the target's clear, but the pins are blurry. So the clarifier helps to make that a lot easier to see the correlation between the pins and the target.
Does it have magnification?
No, the clarifier is a clarifier only, not a magnifier.
Okay, I will vote to support that. The motion passes 6-5 with the tiebreaker. That puts us back to our original motion, which we're going to proceed to vote on now, which was to accept the remainder of the proposal as presented, with the exception of cell phones and two-way radios. All in favor? Joe?
Yes.
Motion passes 10-0. Thank you. That will move us on to item 14. I would be looking for a motion to adjourn.
I make that motion.
Second? Second, we have Brad, Eric, all in favor? Unanimous.
Yes. Good night. Thank you.